Hey guys, it's been a while. I just want to say, hope you're doing alright. Thanks for tuning in today for these 20 first date horror stories. Now, let us know in the comments what you want to hear more of. And as always, if you enjoy these stories, please smash that like button. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join the family. Now, let's enjoy the stories.
I should have walked away the second I saw the box. That's the part that keeps replaying in my head. Not the end, not the worst part, but that tiny square wrapped in silver paper sitting in her hands like it was a cupcake she made just for me. It was our first date. We hadn't even ordered food yet, and she was smiling like she knew something about me that I didn't. I live in a third-floor apartment above a laundromat that never really closes. It smells like warm soap and coins all the time. It's not fancy, but it's mine. I moved there last year after dropping out of community college, telling everyone I just needed a break. Truth is, I needed space. I needed quiet. So I started over in a place where nobody knew me. I met her online 3 weeks before the date. I read her profile at like 1 in the morning when I couldn't sleep. She had normal pictures. Coffee shops. A lake, a mirror selfie and a hoodie. Nothing weird. I remember reading her captions thinking she sounded calm. Stable. Not like the chaotic people I usually end up around. She said she liked old horror movies and thrift stores and long walks when it's cold out. That sounded fine to me. We texted every day after that. Nothing intense. Just random stuff about work and food and music. She never asked anything too personal. I actually liked that. It felt relaxed. The night of the date, I picked this small Thai place near the river. It had yellow string lights on the patio and those metal chairs that always feel slightly unsteady. It was early fall, so it wasn't freezing yet, just cool enough to see your breath if you tried. She was already there when I walked up. Sitting straight, hands folded on the table. When she saw me, her face lit up like we'd known each other for years. Then she stood up and handed me the box. She arrived smiling and handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a key labeled with my apartment number. Not just the building number. My exact apartment number, written in black marker on a white tag looped through the keyring. At first, I honestly thought it was a joke. Some kind of weird icebreaker. Like maybe she grabbed a random key and scribbled something on it to mess with me. But the key wasn't random. I knew the shape instantly. It was one of those copies from the hardware store down the street from my place. The grooves were slightly uneven near the top. I'd noticed that about my spare. I only had 2 keys. One I kept on me. The other I hid in a coffee can in the cabinet above my fridge. I never told anyone that. Not friends. Not family. Definitely not her. My stomach felt heavy, like I'd swallowed a rock. She just kept smiling. Not a creepy smile. Not exaggerated. Just normal. Waiting for me to react. I turned the key over in my hand. The metal was cold even though it had been in the box. That's what I remember most. It didn't feel like a prank. It felt used. I tried to act calm. I didn't want to cause a scene. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe she guessed my address somehow. Maybe she worked near my building and recognized me going in once. Maybe it mentioned something and forgot. We sat down and ordered food like nothing was wrong. She talked about her job at a vet clinic, about how one of the dogs there hated everyone except her. She described it in detail, laughing softly at the right parts. I nodded along, but I couldn't hear half of it. My brain kept circling the same thought. How did she get that key? At one point, she reached across the table and touched my wrist, just lightly. It wasn't flirty. It felt grounding, like she was checking my pulse. I asked her how she knew my apartment number. I tried to keep my voice steady, casual. She tilted her head slightly, like I had asked something obvious. Then she said she wanted me to have something meaningful on the first date, something practical. That didn't answer anything. The food came. I barely tasted it. My phone buzzed in my pocket halfway through the meal. I ignored it at first, but it buzzed again and again. Finally, I checked it. 3 missed notifications from my security camera app. I had a cheap indoor camera pointed at my front door, mostly for peace of mind. It sent alerts when it detected movement. The timestamps were from 10 minutes earlier, while I was sitting across from her. I opened the app. The first clip showed my front door unlocking. Not being kicked in, not forced, unlocking smoothly like someone using a key. The second click showed my door opening slowly, the hallway light spilling into my apartment. The third clip was only 5 seconds long, just the inside of my place, quiet, empty. I felt my chest tighten so hard it hurt. She was still sitting there, still in front of me. I looked up at her. She was watching my face, not my phone, like she knew exactly what I was seeing. That's when she finally said it. She said she didn't like secrets between people who might build something real. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I left money on the table, way more than the bill, and stood up. I told her I needed to check something at home. I don't remember if I even waited for her reaction. I just walked. The whole drive back to my place felt unreal. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. My mind kept trying to fill in blanks that didn't make sense. If she was at the restaurant the whole time, who opened my door? Unless the footage was old, unless the app glitched, I kept reaching for excuses. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw her car, parked 2 spaces away from mine. I hadn't noticed her leave the restaurant. I didn't remember hearing her chair move, but her car was there, the same dent on the rear bumper I'd seen when I arrived. My building looked normal, lights on in a couple windows, the laundromat humming downstairs. I climbed the stairs too fast and almost tripped on the second floor landing. My door was closed. I stood there for a full minute just staring at it. Then I unlocked it. Everything looked normal at first glance. Couch, coffee table, TV. But the air felt different, warmer somehow, used. I walked to the kitchen. The cabinet above the fridge was open. The coffee can was on the counter. Empty. My spare key was gone. I checked the bedroom next. The closet door was slightly ajar. I never leave it like that. Inside, my jackets were pushed to one side, like someone had run their hand along them. Then I noticed something on my bed. Another small box. Same silver wrapping paper. I didn't want to open it. I knew I shouldn't, but I did. Inside was a photo. It was me, sleeping, taken from the foot of my bed. The timestamp in the corner was from 2 nights earlier. I didn't even own a camera that could take photos like that. My whole body went cold. My phone buzzed again. A message from her. It wasn't long. Just a sentence saying she hoped I liked the surprise and that she believed in equal access. I felt like I was going to throw up. I checked the camera app again. There was a new clip. This one showed my bedroom. From the angle of my own camera pointed toward the front door, you could see down the hallway if the bedroom door was open. In the clip, my bedroom door was open. And for a split second, someone walked past it. It was her. Same jacket, same hair. But that clip was timestamped 15 minutes ago, while I was standing in my kitchen. I turned around slowly. My apartment was silent. Too silent. Then I heard it, a soft creak from the hallway behind me. Not loud, just the sound of weight shifting on old floorboards. I didn't call out. I didn't move right away. Another step. Closer. I realized something in that moment that made everything worse. The key she gave me at the restaurant wasn't the spare. It was another copy. Clean. Newly cut. My spare was still missing. Which meant she had at least 2. I grabbed the nearest thing I could reach, which was a heavy ceramic bowl from the counter. The hallway light flicked on. I didn't see her face first. I saw her shadow stretching long across the wall. She stepped into view slowly, like she had all the time in the world. No panic. No rush. She looked exactly the same as she had at the restaurant. Calm. Smiling slightly. She said she didn't want me to feel alone in my own home anymore. That's when I ran. I didn't try to fight. I didn't try to argue. I bolted past her out the front door, down the stairs, almost falling again. I could hear her footsteps behind me at first, then they stopped. I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove. No destination, just away. I spent the night in a motel off the highway that cost $63 for a room that smelled like smoke. I didn't go back the next day, or the day after. When I finally returned with a friend, she was gone. No sign of forced entry. No note. No boxes. Just one thing missing. Every copy of my key. I knew something was wrong before he even turned the corner onto my street. It was just a regular Friday night. I had music playing in my apartment, half-dressed, mascara wand in one hand and my phone in the other. I remember staring at myself in my bedroom mirror thinking I almost canceled 3 times. First dates made me feel like I'm about to take a test I forgot to study for. You hype yourself up and then regret everything 5 minutes later. He insisted on picking me up. I told him I could drive. I always drive myself. But he said he liked being a gentleman. Said it felt more real that way. I didn't think much of it. We'd been talking for about a month. I read all his messages carefully in the beginning, looking for red flags. There weren't any. He worked in it, like hiking, had a dog named Milo. Normal stuff. The only thing that made me pause was how much he seemed to notice. He'd comment on tiny things. If I changed my profile picture, he'd mention the new earrings. If I posted a photo of my coffee, he'd guess the cafe. It felt observant at first, like he paid attention. I told myself that was a good sign. I live in a second-floor apartment above a closed-down hardware store. The building is old. The floors creak. The hallway smells like old carpet and dust. My bedroom faces the back alley where a broken streetlight flickers every night. It's not scary, just kind of sad. That week, I moved my bedroom mirror. It used to sit across from my bed, leaning against the wall. I'd had it there for months. Then one night, I woke up around 3 and saw my own reflection in the dark. It freaked me out more than I wanted to admit. I kept thinking I saw movement that wasn't me. So I dragged it to the corner by my closet, angled away from the bed. I didn't tell anyone. It wasn't a big deal. Just a random decision at 2 in the morning. At 7:42, he texted that he was outside. I grabbed my purse, did one last glance around my room, and left. I remember locking the door carefully. I always double-check it. His car was black, clean, smelled like one of those pine tree air fresheners. He got out, smiled, opened the passenger door for me. He looked exactly like his pictures. Tall, clean-cut, calm. I felt relieved. I got in, buckled up, and before I even finished saying hi, he looked at me kind of sideways and asked why I'd moved my bedroom mirror. I actually laughed at first because I thought he was joking. But he didn't laugh. He kept his eyes on the road like he just asked about the weather. Casual, like it was obvious. My brain stalled. I remember staring at the dashboard clock. 7:44. I asked what he meant. He said it used to be across from the bed, and now it was by the closet. He said it was better before because it reflected more of the room. I felt my stomach drop so fast, it almost hurt. I told myself maybe I mentioned it. Maybe I sent a photo once and forgot. I started scrolling through our old messages in my head. I had never sent him a picture of my bedroom, not even a corner of it. He kept talking, explaining that he notices layouts, that he has a thing for interior spaces. He described how the light from my window used to hit the mirror and bounce toward the door. I had never posted a photo facing my window. I asked him how he knew what my bedroom looked like. He finally glanced at me, and there was this tiny smile, not friendly, not mean, just satisfied. He said, "I'd be surprised what you can see if you know where to stand." My mouth went dry. The drive to the restaurant felt longer than it was. Every streetlight we passed made shadows move across his face. I kept thinking about my apartment, about the back alley, about the broken streetlight that flickered. When we stopped at a red light, I pulled out my phone and opened my security camera app. I didn't tell them I had one. I only had one camera pointed at my living room window because someone tried to pry it open last year. It didn't face my bedroom. The app showed nothing unusual, just an empty living room. He asked what I was checking. I said nothing, just notifications. He nodded slowly like he didn't believe me. The restaurant was a small diner near the highway, neon sign buzzing. Half the booths empty. It wasn't romantic, but I didn't care. I just wanted bright lights and people around. We sat across from each other, and he acted completely normal. Asked about my week. Told me about a project at work. His voice was steady. He even joked about the sticky menu. But every now and then he'd mention something small about my apartment. He asked if my upstairs neighbor was still playing music late at night. I never told him about that. He asked if I fixed the loose handle on my dresser. I had complained about that to my friend, not online. Each comment was quick, tossed into conversation like it was nothing. I started replaying the last month in my head. Every time I'd left for work. Every night I'd fallen asleep. I thought about my bedroom window. It didn't have blinds, just thin curtains. During the day, you could probably see in if you were close enough. But the alley is narrow. The only place someone could stand would be right under my window. Halfway through dinner, I couldn't take it anymore. I told him I wasn't feeling well. He didn't argue. He paid the bill and drove me back. The whole ride was silent except for the hum of the engine. When we pulled up to my building, he didn't unlock the doors right away. He just sat there. Then he asked why I stopped leaving the lamp on by the window at night. My chest tightened. I used to leave that lamp on all the time. It made the room feel less dark. But after I moved the mirror, I started turning it off because the reflection annoyed me. I hadn't told anyone that. I asked him again how he knew. This time he looked directly at me. He said he liked to walk at night, said my street was quiet, said my window was easy to see from the alley if you stood near the dumpster and looked up. The way he said it was calm, like he was describing a nice view. I felt cold all over. I unlocked the door and got out without saying goodbye. I didn't run, but I walked fast. I could feel his eyes on my back. When I got inside my apartment, I locked the door and leaned against it, trying to breathe. Everything looked normal, but I went straight to my bedroom. The mirror was still by the closet. I stared at the window. The curtains were thin enough that if someone stood close, they could see inside when the light was on. I walked to the window slowly and pulled the curtain back just a little. The alley was empty, except for the dumpster. And right next to it, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A milk crate, turned upside down, placed directly under my window. I felt dizzy. I grabbed my phone and checked the camera app again. Still nothing in the living room. Then I noticed something on my bedroom floor. Near the mirror. A small black square. I crouched down and picked it up. It was a tiny camera. About the size of a coin. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. It was pointed directly at my bed. I don't know how long it had been there. I don't know how he got in. I locked my door every night, but the lock is old. The frame is weak. Maybe it wouldn't take much. My phone buzzed. A message from him. He said he hoped I wasn't upset and that he just liked to feel close to people he was interested in. I felt sick. I called the police. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. While I was on hold, I heard something outside. A soft scrape. Like plastic against concrete. I went back to the window, then barely moved the curtain. He was there. In the alley. Standing on the milk crate. Looking up. The broken streetlight flickered above him, making everything look unreal. He wasn't waving, he wasn't smiling. He was just staring straight at my window like he expected me to come back into view. The police arrived 15 minutes later. By the time they checked the alley, he was gone. They found scuff marks near my doorframe, said it looked like someone had forced it at some point and it hadn't been obvious. They took the camera as evidence. I stayed at my sister's place that night. I never went on another date with him. I moved out 2 weeks later. The mirror is still in my closet at my new place. I don't put it anywhere near my bed now. I knew the night was over the second I saw my own face on her phone. Not in a selfie. Not from earlier that evening, but from outside the restaurant window, looking in at us like we were animals in a tank. I don't get nervous on first dates anymore. I used to back when I cared too much about what I said. Now I just show up and see what happens. If it's awkward, it's awkward. Whatever. This one felt different though, in a good way at first. We'd been talking for 2 weeks and she was funny in a dry way. Not over the top. Not trying too hard. We picked this small Italian place downtown. It used to be a bookstore before it shut down. They kept the tall front windows, so the whole front wall is basically glass. At night, you can see straight in from the sidewalk. It's kind of cool because the street lights reflect off the window and everything inside looks warm. I got there early because I hate being late. I sat near the window without even thinking about it. That's important. I chose the table, not her. When she walked in, she looked just like her pictures. Dark hair, oversized sweater, kind of serious face until she smiled. She hugged me like we already knew each other. It felt normal. The first 20 minutes were actually good. We talked about work. I live in a small apartment near the train tracks, and she joked about how she could never sleep with that noise. She said she worked in graphic design, mostly from home. She mentioned liking photography, but said she wasn't very good at it. I remember that part clearly now. The restaurant wasn't crowded. A couple on the other side, an older guy at the bar. Soft music playing. Outside, people walked past every few minutes. You could see their shadows slide across the glass. I didn't notice anyone stopping. We ordered pasta. She got something with mushrooms. I got lasagna. We split a bottle of cheap red wine that cost $28. I only remember the price because I looked at the menu twice to make sure I wasn't overspending. Halfway through dinner, she got quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet, more like she was thinking about something. She kept glancing at the window behind me. At first, I thought she was distracted by people walking by. Then she picked up her phone. She didn't say anything. She just unlocked it and turned the screen toward me. It took my brain a second to process what I was looking at. It was us. Sitting at that exact table. Her back slightly turned. We leaned forward with my hand near my glass. The angle was from outside, through the window. You could see the reflection of the streetlight across my face. And the timestamp in the corner said 3 minutes ago. I actually laughed at first because I thought maybe she was showing me some artsy shot someone else took. Maybe there was a street photographer out there and she thought it was funny. But the way she was looking at me wasn't playful. It was expectant. I asked her who took it. She said she did. I remember feeling confused in a really physical way, like my brain was lagging. She had been sitting across from me the entire time. She hadn't left the table. I would have noticed. The bathroom was behind me. If she'd gotten up, I'd have seen her walk that way. I told her that didn't make sense. She shrugged and zoomed in on the photo. There was someone faintly visible in the reflection on the glass. A silhouette standing on the sidewalk, holding a phone. My stomach dropped. I turned around fast, almost knocking my knee against the table. Outside, the sidewalk looked empty. A couple walking farther down. No one standing directly in front of our window. When I turned back, she was watching me carefully. She said she liked capturing moments as they happened, said it made things feel more real. I asked again how she took it. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she scrolled to another photo. This one was from a different angle, closer to the glass. You could see more detail on my face. The timestamp said 1 minute ago. I felt heat crawl up my neck. There was no way she'd taken that without leaving, unless someone else did. I scanned the restaurant. The older guy at the bar was staring into his drink. The couple was arguing quietly. No one looked suspicious. No one was holding a phone pointed at us. I asked her if someone was helping her. She smiled slightly and said she didn't like eating alone. That sentence didn't land right. I looked at the window again. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Across the street, near a park van, someone was standing still. It was hard to see because of the glare from the lights, just a shape. Tall, hood up, facing our direction. I felt my pulse pick up. When I looked back at her, she was already watching me instead of her phone. She said it was interesting how people don't notice being observed if they're comfortable. I asked her what she meant. She said she'd been coming to this restaurant for weeks, sitting outside sometimes, watching couples through the window, studying how they interact. The way she said studying made my skin crawl. She reached across the table and tapped my hand lightly, said she thought it'd be different. I pulled my hand back without even thinking. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. It was a photo. The same one she showed me, but taken from slightly farther back. You could see more of the sidewalk. And in that photo, clearly visible was her, standing outside the window, holding her phone up, while also sitting across from me at the table. I felt like the room tilted. I looked at her. She was still there, right in front of me. Same sweater, same expression. I looked back at the photo. The girl outside looked exactly like her. Same hair, same clothes. I checked the timestamp. It said just now. I slowly lifted my eyes toward the window. The figure across the street stepped forward into better light. It was her. Or someone who looked exactly like her. Same posture. Same oversized sweater. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I looked back at the girl sitting across from me. She hadn't moved. She was smiling faintly. I told myself it had to be a trick, a reflection, some weird angle with the glass. Then the girl outside raised her hand and waved. Not at the restaurant. At me. I couldn't breathe properly. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly across the floor. A few people looked over. The girl across from me stayed seated. She tilted her head slightly, like she was waiting to see what I'd do. My phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time taken from even closer to the glass. Close enough that you could see inside clearly. In that photo, the table across from me was empty. There was no one sitting there. I looked down at the table in real life. She was still there. I blinked hard. When I looked again, her chair was empty. Just empty. Like she'd never been there. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it. The couple nearby were still arguing. The older guy still at the bar. No one seemed to notice anything strange. I slowly turned toward the window. The girl outside was gone. I grabbed my jacket and walked toward the door, not caring about the bill. When I stepped outside, the air felt colder than it should have. I looked up and down the sidewalk. Nothing. Then I noticed the van across the street. Its back doors were slightly open. Inside, I could see screens. Multiple screens. All showing live feeds. Of the restaurant. Different angles. Different tables. And one of them was focused on mine. On me. Standing alone. A hand reached out from inside the van and pulled the door shut. The engine started immediately. I ran toward it, but it sped off before I got close enough to see the driver clearly. I stood there on the sidewalk, trying to make sense of what just happened. My phone buzzed one last time. A final photo. Taken from directly behind me. Of me standing outside the restaurant. Looking at the empty street. I deleted every dating app that night. I still avoid restaurants with big front windows.
Hey guys, really sorry to disturb you, but if you're enjoying the stories up until this point, please smash that like button. That's all I'm asking for you guys. Let's break some records this year. Now back to the stories.
I should have left when he touched my lower back like he owned me. That was the first weird thing, not the biggest, not the worst, just the first tiny crack in what was supposed to be a normal night. We had been talking for maybe 10 days. We matched on an app and he seemed polite. A little intense, but not in an obvious way. He texted good morning every day. Asked about my job. I live alone in a small duplex near the edge of town, and he said he liked that I was independent. That should have felt like a compliment. He picked a restaurant, so he knew a quiet place outside the city where we could actually talk. It was this fancy steakhouse by a lake, the kind with dim lighting and heavy wooden doors. The parking lot was half empty when I got there. I remember thinking it felt too serious for a first date. He was already waiting outside when I pulled in. He hugged me right away. Not a quick, polite hug. A long one. His hand resting flat on my lower back, fingers pressing slightly like he was testing how I fit there. Inside, the place smelled like butter and grilled meat. Soft piano music playing somewhere in the background. The kind of place where people celebrate anniversaries. We were barely seated before it happened. The waiter came over with menus, smiling like they always do, and he introduced me as his fiance. Not girlfriend, not date, not even by my name. Fiance. I felt my face heat up instantly. I laughed awkwardly because I thought it was a joke. Some weird humor attempt. But he didn't laugh. He said it so smoothly, so naturally, like it was a fact. The waiter congratulated us. I immediately corrected it, said it was just our first date. I tried to keep it light, like I wasn't embarrassed. He gently placed his hand over mine on the table and said I was being modest. The waiter chuckled and walked off. I waited for him to fix it, to say sorry, to admit he misspoke. He didn't. Instead, he squeezed my hand slightly and said he liked how shy I got. I pulled my hand back. He smiled and that reaction was cute. I told myself maybe he just had a strange sense of humor, Some people commit too hard to a joke. I tried to move on. We ordered food. He ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted. Said he already knew I'd prefer the salmon over the steak. I didn't even like salmon. I tried again to clear up the fiancé thing. I said I didn't want the waiter thinking something that wasn't true. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me carefully, like he was studying my reaction. He said it didn't matter what strangers thought. What mattered was what we were building. Building what? We hadn't even finished appetizers. As the night went on, he kept referring to future plans. Not vague ones, specific ones. He talked about houses with big porches, about how many kids he wanted, about how he'd always imagined his wife having dark hair like mine. It didn't feel like daydreaming. It felt like a blueprint. The waiter came back with drinks and called me his fiancé again. This time I didn't even get a chance to speak before he confirmed it. Said we were keeping the wedding small. I felt like I was sinking into the seat. I noticed something else then. He was wearing a ring. Not on his left hand. On his right. A plain silver band. I asked about it. He said it was temporary. Said he didn't want to lose the real one before the ceremony. I stared at him. He said it calmly, like we had already discussed this. I told him I thought this was getting weird. He didn't get defensive. He didn't laugh it off. He just looked disappointed, like I had failed some test. Halfway through dinner, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He showed me a picture. It was of me. Not from that night. From earlier that week. I was unlocking my front door. The angle was from across the street. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might pass out. He said he liked making sure I got home safe. I never told him exactly where I live, just the neighborhood. I asked how he found my place. He said it wasn't hard if you pay attention to small details. Street signs in the background of photos, reflections in windows, patterns. He said it like he was proud. I felt trapped. The restaurant suddenly felt too quiet, too far from everything. I grabbed my phone under the table and texted my friend my location. He noticed. He asked who I was messaging. I said no one. He smiled slightly and said trust is important in a marriage. Marriage. We were still on the first date. The food arrived. I barely touched it. He kept talking about the wedding like it was scheduled. Mentioned venues near the lake. Said his parents would love me. At one point he said he already told them about me. I asked what he told them. He said he told them he finally found her. I felt cold all over. The waiter came by again and asked how everything was. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders and said his fiancée was just overwhelmed with joy. I froze. I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want to seem dramatic, but I could feel something tightening around me. When the bill came, it was $142. He paid without blinking. Then he stood and held out his hand for me. I hesitated. He leaned in close and whispered that it would look strange if his fiancée didn't walk out with him. The way he said it made it clear he wasn't joking anymore. I stood up. My legs felt weak. As we walked toward the exit, I noticed a couple near the door smiling at us. The woman pointed at my hand. That's when I saw it. There was a ring on my finger. A thin silver band. I hadn't noticed him put it on me. I immediately tried to slide it off, but it was tight. Too tight. He noticed me struggling and gently took my hand. He said it fit perfectly. I told him to take it off. His smile faded for the first time. He said not to embarrass him. Outside, the parking lot was darker than I remembered. I told him I needed to use the restroom before leaving. He hesitated, then nodded. Instead of going back inside, I ran around the side of the building and called my friend. While I was on the phone, I saw headlights flick on in the parking lot. His car. But he wasn't driving away. He was repositioning it, blocking mine. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I hung up and ran back toward the entrance. He was standing near the door, scanning the lot. Looking for me. I ducked behind a large decorative planter and waited until he walked toward the other side of the building. Then I sprinted to my car. I managed to squeeze out before he could fully block me. As I drove away, I saw him standing in the middle of the lot, watching. My phone buzzed at a red light. A message from him. He said running away wouldn't stop what was meant to happen. I went straight to my friend's place and didn't go home that night. The next morning, I noticed something that made my chest tighten again. The ring was still on my finger. I don't remember putting it back on. I don't remember taking it off. But there it was. And it still fit perfectly. The second my phone powered down, she exhaled like someone had just taken a weight off her chest. That sound is what stuck with me, not a laugh. Not a sigh like she was annoyed. It was relief, real relief, like she'd been waiting for that exact moment all night. I almost didn't go on the date. It had been a long week and I was tired of small talk with strangers. But she was different over text. She hated social media, said it made her anxious. She only used messaging apps because she had to. I thought that was kind of refreshing. We agreed to meet at this old roadside diner about 20 minutes outside town, the kind of place truckers stop at around midnight, neon sign buzzing, parking lot full of potholes. I live in a small rental house near the highway, so the drive wasn't bad. She was already there when I walked in. She sat in a booth near the back corner, away from the windows. I noticed that right away. There were plenty of empty tables near the front under the bright lights, but she chose the darkest part of the place. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes kept darting toward the entrance like she was expecting someone else. I sat down and put my phone on the table like I always do, just habit. Before the waiter even came over, she leaned forward slightly and asked if I could turn it off. Not silent, not face down, off. I laughed because I thought she was joking, like she wanted full attention or something. She didn't laugh back. She said she felt safer when phones weren't around. The word safer hit weird. I asked what she meant. She said she didn't like being tracked. I told her I wasn't tracking anything. She said it wasn't about me. I should have paid more attention to that sentence. I hesitated for maybe 5 seconds. Then I shrugged and held the power button down. The screen went black. I even flipped it over to show her it was off. That's when she exhaled, like she had been holding her breath. The change in her body language was instant. Her shoulders relaxed. Her hands stopped fidgeting with the edge of the napkin. She even leaned back in the booth like she could finally sit comfortably. I tried to joke about it, said I felt disconnected now. She said that was the point. The waiter came, we ordered burgers and fries. The total was supposed to be around $34 for both of us. Cheap, casual, nothing fancy. At first, everything seemed normal. She talked about growing up in a small town, about how she moved around a lot as a kid. I noticed she was careful with details. If I asked where exactly, she'd give a vague answer. If I asked when, she'd say a few years back. I didn't think too much of it. Then she asked me something that made my stomach tighten a little. She asked if anyone knew where I was. I said yeah, probably. My friend had my location on my phone. Her face shifted for a split second. I reminded her my phone was off. She stared at the table. I asked why that mattered. She said she just liked privacy. The diner felt quieter than it should have. I started noticing how far we were from the front door. How the other customers were mostly older men eating alone. How the cashier kept disappearing into the back. Halfway through our food, she leaned in and asked if I trusted her. It was too early for that question. I said I barely knew her. She nodded slowly like that was fair. Then she told me she used to date someone who tracked her constantly. Said he put spyware on her phone. Said he always knew where she was. I felt bad for her. That sounded messed up. She said she learned how easy it was to follow someone through their device, through pings and towers and apps. I asked if that's why she wanted my phone off. She nodded. But there was something else in her expression. Not fear. Not exactly. More like calculation. I started to feel a small knot in my stomach. After we finished eating, she suggested we take a short drive. Said there was a scenic overlook about 5 minutes away, a place where you could see the whole valley at night. I hesitated. But I had already turned off my phone. I had already committed to the vibe of the night. And it didn't sound dangerous, just a lookout point. We took her car. It was an older sedan, clean, no clutter. The windows were tinted darker than usual. As we pulled out of the diner parking lot, I noticed something strange. 2 headlights across the street turned on at the same time. A truck that had been parked there without lights suddenly started following us. I told myself it was coincidence. We drove down a narrow road that curved away from the highway. No streetlights, just trees on both sides. The kind of road that feels longer at night. The truck stayed behind us. Not speeding up, not falling back. Just there. I mentioned it. She didn't look in the mirror. She just said not to worry. We reached the overlook. It was basically a gravel clearing with a wooden railing. The valley below was dark except for distant town lights. She parked near the edge. The truck pulled in behind us. My heart started pounding harder. I asked if she knew them. She said she didn't want me to panic. That sentence made everything worse. Two men got out of the truck. They walked toward her car slowly. She finally looked at me. She said she needed help and that this was the only way. I felt the air leave my lungs. I asked what she was talking about. She said the guy she used to date had people watching her, that they tracked her phone constantly, that the only way to move without being found was to be near someone else whose phone was active. Then she looked at the dashboard where my phone would have been if it was on. She said when I turned it off, it ruined the plan. My brain struggled to catch up. She explained quickly, said they had been using her phone signal to predict where she'd go, that if my phone had stayed on, they could have bounced signals off mine, confused the tracking. I didn't know if that even made sense. The two men were closer now. One knocked lightly on her window. She didn't unlock the doors. She looked at me with something close to desperation. Said I needed to turn my phone back on. I told her it was inside the diner. Her face went pale. I had left it on the table after turning it off. I didn't even think about it when we left. The men outside were no longer knocking. They were just standing there, watching us. She whispered that they weren't supposed to find her tonight. One of the men walked back to the truck and grabbed something from the bed. I couldn't see what it was. She started the car suddenly and slammed it into reverse, gravel spraying everywhere. We nearly hit the truck as we swung around. They didn't chase immediately. They just got back in calmly. We sped down the dark road. My heart was beating so hard it hurt. She kept apologizing, saying she didn't think they'd notice so fast, saying it was supposed to work. I asked how long this had been going on. She didn't answer. We drove for what felt like forever until we reached a gas station near the highway. She pulled in, shaking. I got out immediately. The truck was nowhere in sight. I told her I couldn't be part of whatever this was. She nodded like she expected that. I called a friend from the gas station phone and waited inside until he came. When I got home, my phone was still at the diner. The staff said it had been there all night. No missed calls. No strange apps. Nothing. I never saw her again. Sometimes I wonder if those men were actually tracking her, or if she just needed someone whose phone she could control. I didn't think anything of it when he asked what time I usually go to sleep. It felt like normal small talk, the kind of random question you ask when you're trying to figure out someone's routine. I answered without even thinking, and then he lifted his wrist, tapped his watch, and set an alarm. That was it. No joke, no explanation. Just a quick glance at the screen, a few taps, and a tiny vibration sound. I remember staring at his wrist longer than I meant to. We met at this rooftop bar downtown. Not the fancy kind with velvet rows, just a mid-level building with string lights and metal chairs. You could see the freeway from up there, had lights moving like a river below. I live about 15 minutes away in a studio apartment above a bakery. It smells like sugar every morning, which is honestly the best part of my place. He was already at a table when I got there. Tall, clean shoes, crisp button-down shirt like he had somewhere important to be after. He stood when I approached, pulled out my chair, very put together. At first, I felt underdressed. He asked a lot of questions, not in a bad way, just focused. He wanted details, where I worked, what time I started, whether I worked from home some days, how long my commute was. I joked that he sounded like he was building a schedule for me. He smiled and said routines are important. The sun was setting when he asked about my sleep. He phrased it casually, like he was comparing habits. I set around 11:30 on weekdays, sometimes later on weekends if I'm binge watching something. That's when he looked at his watch and set the alarm. I laughed and asked what that was for. He said he liked reminders. I asked reminders for what? He said important moments. Something about that felt off, but I brushed it aside. Maybe he was one of those productivity-obsessed people. We ordered drinks. Mine was $14. His was something more complicated and definitely more expensive. He barely touched it. He kept checking his watch, though. Not like someone waiting for a message. More like someone sensing up with something only he could see. About an hour into the date, I started noticing how specific his questions were. He asked if I kept my curtains open at night. I told him sometimes, depending on the weather. He nodded like that information mattered. He asked if my building had security cameras. I said I thought so, near the front entrance. He tapped his watch again after that. The sky went dark. The rooftop lights felt harsher against the night. I felt exposed up there suddenly, like anyone from the surrounding buildings could look up and watch us. He mentioned he liked knowing when people were at their most vulnerable. That late at night, when routines take over, people become predictable. I laughed nervously and said that sounded intense. He shrugged and said predictability makes life easier. I checked my phone at one point and saw it was almost 10:30. He noticed. He said I still had about an hour. I asked an hour until what? He looked at his watch and smiled slightly. The rest of the date felt heavy after that. He suggested we take a walk around the block before heading home. I agreed because I didn't want to seem paranoid. The streets were mostly empty. A few bars still open. Music drifting out onto the sidewalk. He walked slightly behind me at times, not always beside me. I could feel it, the space shifting. When we got back to the parking lot, he asked which car was mine. I hesitated but pointed it out. He nodded slowly like he was memorizing it. Then he asked if I locked my doors immediately after getting inside at night. I said yes, obviously. He smiled and said good. I drove home with this weird tight feeling in my chest. Not panic, just something unsettled. When I got to my building, everything looked normal. Lights out in the bakery downstairs. My upstairs neighbor's TV glowing through her window. I went inside, locked the door, changed into sweatpants. At 11:28, I was brushing my teeth. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. I opened the message. It was a photo of my building, taken from across the street. Timestamped 11:27. My heart started pounding so loud I had to grip the sink. Another message came through. It said almost time. My hands started shaking. I ran to the window and pulled the curtain aside just a little. Across the street near the lamppost, someone was standing. I couldn't see his face clearly, but the posture looked familiar. My phone buzzed again. 11:30. At that exact second, I heard a faint vibration. Not from my phone. From outside. Like a watch alarm going off. Short. Subtle. Then it stopped. The figure across the street raised his wrist slightly, glanced at it, and lowered it. My whole body went cold. I stepped back from the window so fast I almost tripped over the rug. Another message. Sleep well. I locked my bedroom door even though I knew it wouldn't matter much if someone really wanted in. I called my friend and told her everything. She told me to call the police. But what would I say? That a guy from a date was standing on a public sidewalk. I looked through the curtain again 5 minutes later. He was gone. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was coincidence. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe I was overthinking it. Until I checked my door. There was a small piece of paper taped to it. No envelope, just folded once. It had a time written on it. 11:30. Underneath it, another time. 6:45. That's when my alarm goes off for work. I never told him that. My chest felt tight again. I called out sick and stayed home that day. Around 6:45 the next morning, even though I hadn't set my alarm, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message said rise and shine. I blocked it. The messages kept coming from different numbers, all timed exactly to my routine. When I left for work 2 days later, I noticed something else. On the sidewalk across from my building near the lamppost, there was a faint mark on the concrete, like someone had been standing in the same spot over and over. I don't wear a watch anymore, and I don't tell anyone what time I go to sleep. I should have lied. That's what I think about now. If I had just said some random time. 2 in the morning, 8 p.m. Anything other than the truth. But I didn't. I answered without thinking, like it was harmless small talk, and watched him press a few buttons on his watch like he was setting a reminder to water a plant. He casually asked what time I usually go to sleep and then set an alarm on his watch. It didn't even register as creepy at first. It felt quirky. Like maybe he was joking about checking if I stuck to my routine. I even smiled. We met at a late-night coffee shop that used to be an auto repair garage. You could still see the big metal garage door rolled up halfway, string lights hanging where car lifts probably used to be. It was open 24 hours, which made it feel safe in a weird way. Bright lights, students on laptops, a couple arguing softly in the corner. I live in a townhouse about 10 minutes away with 2 roommates. The walls are thin. You can hear everything, so I usually stay out late if I want quiet. He was sitting at one of the long wooden tables when I walked in. Dark jacket, sleeves rolled up neatly, a smartwatch on his wrist that looked expensive. He stood when he saw me, smiled but not too wide, controlled. The first half hour was normal, almost boring. He asked about my job at dental office. I asked about his work in logistics. He drank black coffee like he was trying to prove something. Then he started asking about my routine. What time I wake up, whether I hit snooze, if I sleep with the TV on or off, if I lock my bedroom door at night even though I live with roommates. It was detailed, but I didn't clock it as dangerous, just overly curious. When he asked what time I usually go to sleep, I said around midnight on weekdays, maybe 1 on weekends. He nodded once. Then he tilted his wrist toward himself and tapped the screen a few times. I heard a faint vibration. I asked what he was doing. He said he liked setting reminders for important information. I laughed and asked if my bedtime counted as important information. He looked at me in a way that felt too direct and said it might. Something in my stomach tightened slightly, but I brushed it off. We stayed there for almost 2 hours. Around 11:45, he glanced at his watch again and smiled faintly. He said I should probably head home soon. It was strange because I hadn't mentioned leaving. I said I wasn't that tired. He said consistency matters. The way he said it felt rehearsed. I decided to end it there. I told him I had an early morning. He walked me to my car. The parking lot was well lit, a few other cars scattered around. Before I got in, he asked which room was mine in the townhouse. I hesitated. He said he was just curious if I had the window facing the street or the backyard. I lied and said backyard. He nodded slowly, like filing away. When I got home, my roommates were watching a show in the living room. I felt silly even mentioning the watch thing, so I didn't. I went to my room around 11:58. I remember because I checked the time when I plugged in my phone. Midnight. Right on the dot, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it for a second before opening the message. It was just one word. Good night. My chest tightened. I didn't give him my number at the coffee shop. We'd only messaged through the app. I told myself maybe I did give it earlier and forgot. I didn't respond. I locked my bedroom door even though I never do. At 12:05, there was a faint vibration sound. Not from my room. From outside. It was subtle, almost like a phone alarm muffled by distance. I froze. The sound came again. Short buzz. Then silence. I moved slowly toward my window. My townhouse faces a narrow street. There's a sidewalk, then a small strip of grass, then the road. I pulled the curtain back just a little. Across the street, under the streetlight, someone was standing, looking at the row of townhouses. At my row. My heart started pounding so hard it felt loud in my ears. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I recognized the jacket. And the way he stood, hands loosely at his sides. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Right on schedule. I stepped back from the window. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he was just walking. But then I remembered. I told him my room faced the backyard. Yet he was looking up at the front. I stayed away from the window for a full minute. When I finally looked again, he was closer. Not across the street anymore. On my side. Standing on a sidewalk directly in front of our townhouse. His head tilted upward slightly. My room is on the second floor. The vibration sound came again. This time I realized it was his watch alarm. It was set to midnight, to match the time I said I usually fall asleep. He wasn't just setting a reminder. He was setting a check-in. My hands started shaking. I texted my roommates from inside my room and told them to look out the living room window without being obvious. One of them replied almost instantly. "There's a guy outside." My stomach dropped. Another buzz from my phone. A photo this time. Taken from the sidewalk. Of my townhouse. Zoomed in on the second floor. Out my window. Even though my curtain was barely open. I turned off my bedroom light immediately. The figure outside didn't move. He just stood there. After about 3 minutes, he stepped back slowly. Looked at his watch again. Then walked down the street. Not running. Not rushed. Like he had completed a task. The next morning, I checked the app we used to talk. His profile was gone. Deleted. That night, at exactly midnight, my phone buzzed again. New number. Good night. I didn't sleep at midnight anymore after that. I started staying up until 3, 4, sometimes until sunrise. It didn't matter. Every night, at exactly the time I used to say out loud without thinking, my phone would buzz. Like he was still timing me. I didn't even touch my phone. That's the part that still messes with me. I didn't reach for it. I didn't unlock it. It stayed face down on the table the entire time he was gone. And yet when he came back from the bathroom, he looked at me differently. Not confused. Not curious. Accusing. He excused himself to the bathroom and came back asking why I texted someone. It was said so calmly that for a second I actually wondered if I had done it without realizing. We met at a small sushi place tucked between a pet store and a vape shop in a strip mall. Not romantic. Fluorescent lights. Fish tank bubbling near the entrance. The kind of place where the booths are slightly cracked and sticky no matter how much they wipe them down. I live about 20 minutes away in a basement apartment. Low ceilings. One tiny window at ground level that looks out at people's shoes when they walk by. It's cheap. $750 a month. That's why I stay. He was already seated when I walked in, back against the wall, facing the door. I noticed that right away. He waved when he saw me, but his eyes kept scanning the room even while smiling. The first part of the date was fine. He was quiet but attentive. Asked about my job at a daycare. Asked how long I've been single. Asked if I ever went out alone. I remember thinking his questions felt slightly interview-like, but not enough to be alarming. My phone was on the table next to my water glass, screen down. I always do that on dates so it doesn't look like I'm waiting for someone better to text. About 30 minutes in, he said he needed to use the bathroom. He stood up slowly, smoothed down his shirt, and walked toward the back hallway. I didn't pick up my phone. I didn't even look at it. I watched the fish tank instead. There was this one orange fish that kept swimming into the glass like it didn't understand boundaries. He was gone maybe 3 minutes. When he came back, he didn't sit down right away. He stood at the end of the table looking at me. Then he asked why I'd texted someone. My brain stalled. I told him I hadn't. He tilted his head slightly, like he didn't believe me. He said he got a notification. That made no sense. I asked what he meant. He said someone named Megan just got a message from me. Megan is my sister. My chest tightened instantly. I slowly picked up my phone and turned it over. No new messages, no outgoing texts. The screen was still dark from when I set it down. I unlocked it with shaky fingers. No recent text to Megan. The last one was from earlier that afternoon. I showed him. He barely glanced at it. He said maybe I deleted it. I felt my face heat up. I told him I didn't text anyone. He sat down slowly this time, still watching me. Then he pulled out his own phone. He turned the screen toward me. It was a screenshot of a text notification from my name to Megan, sent 2 minutes ago. It just said help. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might faint. The timestamp matched the exact time he was in the bathroom. I grabbed my phone again and opened my messages. Nothing. No help text. I checked deleted messages. Empty. I checked my sent folder. Nothing. I asked him how he even knew my sister's name. I don't remember telling him. He said it popped up on his phone because he has an app that monitors emergency keywords. I stared at him. He said it's just something he uses for security reasons, that it flags certain words. That still didn't explain how my name showed up on his screen. I told him this wasn't funny. He said he wasn't joking. Then he asked who I was trying to signal. Signal. That word felt wrong. I told him I wasn't signaling anyone. He leaned back and crossed his arms. Said it's interesting how people panic when they think they're being watched. I felt a cold wave move through me. I asked what he meant by watched. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked if I always keep my phone face down. I said yes. He nodded slowly, like confirming something. The waiter came over to ask if we wanted more rolls. The total so far was $46. I barely registered it. I felt trapped in that booth. After the waiter left, he leaned forward slightly and lowered his voice. He said it's hard to trust someone who tries to call for help behind your back. My throat felt tight. I told him again I didn't send anything. He said maybe my phone did. That sentence made my stomach drop. He asked if I ever connect to public Wi-Fi automatically. I said sometimes. He smiled faintly. Then he said signals can be intercepted, that messages can be mirrored, that sometimes phones send things without users realizing. I didn't understand half of what he was implying, but I understood enough to know this wasn't normal. I told him I wanted to leave. He didn't stop me. He just watched me get out of my bag. As I stood up, my phone buzzed in my hand. A new message. From Megan. It said, "Are you okay?" My legs felt weak. I opened the conversation. At the top there it was. A message sent 2 minutes earlier. Help. From me. I know I didn't type it. I know I didn't hit send. But it was there. Right under it, Megan had responded. What's wrong? My hands started shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. I looked at him. He was smiling slightly. Not wide, just enough to show he was satisfied. I asked him how he did that. He said, "Do what?" I didn't answer. I walked out of the restaurant without looking back. In the parking lot, I called Megan immediately. She said she got the help text and thought I was in danger. She asked where I was. I told her everything. She said maybe I butt dialed or something. But it wasn't a call. It was a single word text. Perfectly spelled. The next morning, I took my phone to a repair shop. They ran diagnostics. Found nothing unusual. No malware. No unknown apps. Clean. That night, I got another message. From my own number. It just said, "Next time, don't lie." I changed my number the next day. Deleted every app. I still don't know how he knew. Or how that text was sent. I knew I wasn't in control the second she smiled after saying it. It wasn't a loud threat. It wasn't dramatic. She leaned across the small cafe table, close enough that I could smell her perfume, and whispered that if I tried to leave right now, she would scream. Not shout my name. Not call for help in a normal way. She said she would scream like I was hurting her. And she looked completely calm when she said it. We met at a 24-hour cafe near the university campus. It was finals week, so the place was packed with students pretending to study. Laptops open. Coffee cups everywhere. The lights were bright and almost annoying. I picked it on purpose because I figured public and busy meant safe. I lived about 5 blocks away in a small apartment over a convenience store. You can hear the door chime downstairs every time someone walks in at night. It's not glamorous, but it's cheap and I can walk everywhere. She arrived 10 minutes late, breathless but smiling. She apologized in this soft way that made it hard to be annoyed. She had this nervous energy at first, tapping her fingers on the table, looking over her shoulder every few minutes. I thought maybe she was just shy. The first part of the date was actually fine. We talked about classes. She said she was studying psychology but taking a break. She asked what I did. I told her I worked part-time in a warehouse and took night courses when I could. She listened closely, too closely, like she was memorizing things. At one point she asked if I came here often. I said sometimes. She nodded like she expected that answer. About an hour in, I started to feel uncomfortable. Not because of anything obvious. It was just the way she watched people. If someone laughed loudly across the room, she'd glance at them, then at me like measuring something. She asked if I trusted her. It felt early for that question. I laughed and said we just met. She didn't laugh back. Then she reached across the table and put her hand on mine. It wasn't gentle. It was firm. Her nails pressing slightly into my skin. I pulled my hand back slowly. That's when she leaned in. Her voice dropped low enough that no one else could hear. She whispered that if I tried to leave right now, she would scream. At first I thought I misheard her. I stared at her. She kept smiling like nothing had changed. I asked what she meant. She said she didn't like being abandoned. The way she said it made my stomach twist. I looked around the cafe. People typing, studying, a group of girls taking selfies near the counter. No one paying attention to us. I said I wasn't planning to leave. She nodded slowly, like that was the correct answer. But something inside me had already shifted. I tried to lighten the mood, asked about her hobbies, her friends. She answered vaguely, said she preferred one-on-one connections. Then she started describing how easy it is to manipulate a crowd. She said most people react first and think later. That if someone screams, especially a woman, people jump to conclusions immediately. I felt cold all over. She told me she had tested it once in high school. Screamed in a hallway and watched how fast teachers blamed the nearest boy. She said it like it was fascinating. I swallowed hard. I realized then that she wasn't joking earlier. I shifted in my seat and glanced at the exit. She noticed. Her eyes followed mine. She leaned in again and repeated the threat softly, almost playfully this time. My heart started pounding. I thought about just standing up anyway, but the scenario played out in my head. She screams. People rush over. I look guilty because I'm the guy standing next to her. It would be chaos. I tried to stay calm. I told her I just needed to use the bathroom. She tilted her head slightly, said that was fine. But her eyes didn't leave my face. I stood up slowly. She stayed seated. For a second, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Then I took one step away from the table. Behind me, I heard her chair scrape lightly against the floor. I froze. I turned around. She was standing now, still smiling. She said she would wait right there. But the way she said it made it clear she was watching every move. I walked for the restroom, heart racing. Inside, I locked myself in a stall and tried to breathe. I considered climbing out the small window, but it was barely big enough for a cat. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from her. It said I can see the door from here. My stomach dropped. I didn't even remember giving her my number. We had been messaging through an app. I stepped out of the stall and checked my phone again. Another message. It said, "Don't make this difficult." I washed my hands slowly, trying to think. When I stepped back in the cafe, she was still at the table. But she had moved her chair slightly. So she had a clear view of both the bathroom hallway and the front door. She was planning. I walked back to the table because I didn't see another option. She smiled like I passed a test. The rest of the conversation felt surreal. She talked about loyalty, about how people reveal their true selves when they think they can leave unnoticed. I nodded along, pretending to agree. After about 15 more minutes, she said she needed fresh air. She suggested we step outside together. I hesitated, but staying felt worse. We walked out the front door side by side. The night air felt colder than it should have. The street was quieter than inside. A few students walking past, cars driving by occasionally. She stopped near the entrance. Then she did something that made my chest tighten. She grabbed my arm and dug her nails in slightly. Not enough to break skin. Enough to hurt. She leaned close and whispered again that if I tried to pull away, she would scream. I realized she wasn't just controlling the inside space. She was controlling the outside too. I forced myself to stay calm. I told her I wasn't going anywhere. Then I spotted something across the street. A campus security officer standing near a patrol car. I don't know what made me do it, but I raised my free hand slightly and waved like I recognized him. He looked over. She noticed. Her grip tightened. I smiled and called out casually to the officer, asking about parking rules, like I was genuinely curious. He started walking toward us. Her nails pressed harder into my arm. For a split second, I thought she would follow through on her threat. But she didn't. She released me suddenly, stepped back. Her expression changed completely. Cold. She said I wasn't what she expected. Then she walked away quickly, blending into the small crowd on the sidewalk. By the time the officer reached me, she was gone. I told him nothing was wrong. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding ridiculous. I went home and locked my door. The next morning, I checked the dating app. Her profile was gone. Deleted. Sometimes I still think about how close I was to being trapped by a single scream. I knew I shouldn't have taken the first sip. It wasn't even about the taste. It was the way he looked at me while I did it, like he was waiting for something to click into place. He ordered my drink without asking and insisted I finish it because it works better that way. I still replay that sentence in my head sometimes. The calmness in his voice. The confidence, like this wasn't the first time he had said it. We met at a cocktail bar downtown that tries way too hard to look vintage. Dim lights, exposed brick. Bartenders wearing suspenders. The menu didn't even list normal drinks, just weird names with ingredients I couldn't pronounce. I live in a small apartment above a thrift store. The windows rattle when trucks pass by. It's cheap and close to my job at a bookstore. I almost canceled that night because I had an early shift the next morning, but he seemed interesting over text. A little intense but smart, into psychology and wine and body language. When I got to the bar, he was already seated at a small round table near the back. Not by the entrance. Not near the bar. Tucked away in the corner where the light barely reached. He stood up and hugged me lightly. He smelled like cologne that was too strong for a first date. Before I even sat down fully, the waiter came over. He didn't ask me what I wanted. He just ordered. Said I would have something light and floral. Said it would suit me. I laughed awkwardly and said I usually just get soda or something simple. He waved it off. Said I should trust him. The waiter nodded like this was normal and walked away. I felt a small twist in my stomach. He said he studies preferences. That most people don't actually know what they like until someone guides them. I told him I can pick my own drink. He smiled and said he already did. When the drinks came, mine was in a tall glass with a slice of lemon and something floating on top. It looked harmless. I took a small sip. It tasted slightly bitter under the sweetness. He watched me closely. I asked what was in it. He listed a few ingredients quickly, but I didn't catch all of them. I said it was strong. He leaned forward and said that's the point. The way he said it made my chest feel tight. The conversation moved on. He talked about how people are more honest when they relax. How certain combinations of alcohol and herbs lower resistance. I laughed and said that sounded manipulative. He didn't laugh back. He said it depends on the intention. I stopped drinking for a bit. He noticed immediately. He told me I should finish it. I said I didn't want to get too buzzed. That's when he said it works better that way. I asked what works better. He said clarity. My heart started beating faster. I glanced around the bar. It wasn't crowded. A couple on the other side. 2 guys at the bar laughing loudly. Music loud enough that conversations felt private. I told him I was fine without finishing it. He leaned back and crossed his arms. Said he didn't like when people wasted things. I took another small sip just to ease the tension. He smiled slightly. After about 20 minutes, I started feeling off. Not drunk, just light. My thoughts felt a little slower than usual. I told myself it was probably just nerves. He kept asking deeper questions about past relationships, about fears, about what I would do if I felt trapped somewhere. That question stuck. I asked why he wanted to know. He said he likes understanding reactions. My vision felt slightly blurred at the edges. I looked down at the glass. It was still half full. He noticed me staring at it. He pushed it slightly closer to me. Said I was almost there. Almost where? I felt a wave of unease wash over me. I told him I needed some air. He said, after you finish. I shook my head and reached for my purse. He grabbed my wrist lightly. Not hard, just enough to stop me. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He said, trust me. I pulled my hand back. My heart was pounding now. I stood up anyway. The room tilted slightly. He stayed seated, watching me carefully. I said I needed the bathroom. He nodded slowly. Said, don't take too long. The hallway to the restroom felt longer than it should have. Inside, I splashed water on my face. I stared at myself in the mirror and tried to focus. My thoughts felt foggy, but not completely gone. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no strange messages. I stayed in there longer than necessary, trying to clear my head. When I walked back out, he was standing outside the restroom door. My stomach dropped. He said I looked pale. I told him I wasn't feeling well. He said that's normal at first. At first. I asked what he meant. He said some people fight it. Fight what? He tilted his head slightly. Said the body resists relaxation when it doesn't feel safe. My heart felt like it was beating in my throat. I realized then that whatever was in that drink wasn't just alcohol. I pushed past him and walked toward the exit. He followed calmly. Not rushing. Not grabbing me. Just close enough. Outside, the night air hit me hard. I felt slightly clearer. He stood a few feet away watching. He said I overreacted. Said I didn't give it time to work properly. Time to work. I told him I was leaving. He sighed that I had disappointed him. Said I ruined the flow. I started walking toward my car. My legs felt weak but steady enough. He didn't chase me. He just called out that it would have been easier if I finished it. Easier for who? I drove home slowly, hands gripping the wheel tight. When I got inside my apartment, I locked the door and sat on the floor for a long time. The next morning, I felt groggy but okay. I looked at the name of the cocktail he ordered. It wasn't on the menu online. I called the bar later that day and asked what was in it. The bartender hesitated. Said they don't normally serve that combination. Said it's something a regular sometimes requests. I asked if the regular was tall, dark jacket, intense stare. There was a pause. Then he said yes. I never went back there. And I never let anyone order for me again. I didn't realize I was being tested until she told me I was doing well. That's what makes it worse. Not that something bad happened right away. It was how calm it all felt at first. How normal. How I kept telling myself I was overthinking it. We met at an arcade bar on the edge of town. It used to be a grocery store years ago. Now it's all neon lights, old pinball machines, sticky floors, and music that's just loud enough to keep conversations private. I picked it because it felt casual, bright, public, safe. I live in a small one-bedroom above a tire shop. My place always smells faintly like rubber and coffee because of the shop next door. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I like routines. I like knowing what to expect. She showed up wearing a denim jacket and boots that looked too clean for the weather. She smiled easily like she had already decided she liked me. That should have felt flattering. The first half hour was actually fun. We played air hockey. She beat me twice. She laughed loudly, but not in an annoying way. She asked questions about my job, about how long I've been single, about whether I considered myself calm under pressure. That last question stuck. I asked what kind of pressure. She shrugged and said life. We grabbed drinks at the bar. Mine cost $12. Hers was something with colored syrup that glowed under the lights. She barely touched it. She kept watching me, though, not in a flirty way, more like she was studying my reactions. At one point, she asked if I trusted her to pick the next game. I said sure. She led me toward the back of the building, past the loud machines, toward a hallway I hadn't noticed before. It was darker back there, fewer people, just a couple of broken arcade cabinets pushed against the wall. I hesitated. She noticed. She smiled and said I was cautious, said that was good. We reached a door at the end of the hallway. It wasn't marked, just plain metal with a push bar. She opened it without knocking. Inside was a smaller room with a pool table and a couch. No windows, one dim overhead light. I asked if this was private. She said sometimes. I told myself it was still inside a public building, still safe. We sat on the couch. She sat closer than necessary. Then she asked if I ever felt trapped in situations. I laughed and said not usually. She leaned back and studied my face. Then she thanked me for being cooperative and said most men panic by this point. My chest tightened immediately. By what point? I looked around the room more carefully. No visible cameras. No other doors except the one we came through. I stood up slowly. She didn't move. She just watched me. I walked to the door and tried the handle. It didn't open. I felt heat rise in my face. I pushed harder. Nothing. I turned around. She was still sitting calmly on the couch. She said the door locks automatically from the outside after 10 minutes. My heart started pounding. I asked why. She shrugged and said it's part of the layout. That didn't make sense. I asked how long we'd been in there. She glanced at her watch and said almost 9 minutes. My throat felt dry. I told her to open it. She said she couldn't from inside. Then she repeated that I was handling it better than most. I asked what she meant by most. She tilted her head slightly and said some guys start yelling. Some bang on the door. Some try to push past her when she blocks it. The way she said it made my stomach twist. I asked how many times she'd done this. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she stood up and stepped closer. Said she liked to see how men react when they realize they don't have control. My pulse was so loud in my ears I could barely hear anything else. I considered shouting. But what if she was telling the truth about the lock timing out automatically? What if yelling made me look unstable? She said if I stayed calm, it would unlock in 1 minute. I forced myself to breathe slowly. She smiled faintly. Said I was impressive. The overhead light flickered slightly. I stared at the door, waiting. At exactly 10 minutes, I heard a soft click. The handle turned easily. Relief flooded through me. I opened the door and stepped back into the hallway. The noise of the arcade felt almost overwhelming after that quiet room. I turned around to look at her. She was still standing in the doorway. She thanked me again for cooperating. Said it saved time. Saved time for what? She stepped out and pulled the door closed behind her. Then she said she likes to filter out men who are reactive. I asked what happens to the ones who panic. She shrugged and said they usually don't get invited back. Invited back where? She didn't elaborate. Instead, she suggested we grab another drink. Like nothing had happened. I told her I needed air. She nodded and followed me toward the exit. Outside, the parking lot felt darker than before. I realized something then. I never saw her pay for anything. Never saw her interact with staff. I asked if she worked there. She smiled and said not officially. That didn't help. As I walked toward my car, I noticed a security camera mounted above the back entrance, pointed directly at that hallway. I looked at her. She said she likes data. Data about what? She said reactions. I got in my car without saying goodbye. As I pulled out of the lot, I checked my phone. There was a new message from her. It said, "Thank you for participating." Participating in what? I blocked her number immediately. Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the way she said most men panic by this point. That meant there was a point. A pattern. A routine. And I had just been part of it. I never went back to that arcade. A month later, I drove past it out of curiosity. The building was dark. Closed. For renovations, according to the sign. I don't know if that room still locks from the outside. I don't know how many men handled it calmly. I just know I was one of them. I should have felt flattered when he insisted on walking me home. That's what I told myself at first. It was late. It was dark. The sidewalks were mostly empty. A guy offering to make sure I got back safe is supposed to be a good thing. That's what everyone says. But the moment he corrected me when I turned left instead of right, something inside me dropped. We met at a small outdoor food market downtown. String lights overhead, food trucks lined up, live acoustic music that wasn't loud enough to drown out conversation. It felt open and casual. I live about a 15-minute walk from there in a third-floor apartment above a dry cleaner. I like being able to walk home after events instead of dealing with parking. He seemed normal at first, quiet but attentive. He asked about my job at a dental clinic. I asked about his work in architecture. He said he likes studying layouts and patterns in city design. I remember thinking that sounded kind of interesting. We ate from different trucks. My total was $18 for tacos and lemonade. He got something from a barbecue stand and barely touched it. He kept asking what nights I usually come to the market. If I always walk. If I ever feel unsafe. I brushed it off as concern. After about an hour, the crowd started thinning out. The music stopped. Vendors began packing up. I told him I should head home. He immediately said he would walk me. I said it was fine, I do it all the time. He insisted. Said it was late, and he would feel better knowing I got home safe. I didn't want to argue over something that sounded polite, so I agreed. We started walking side by side. The streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk. The air smelled like fried food and car exhaust. About 2 blocks in, I decided to take a different route than usual. Not because I was suspicious, just because there was construction on my normal path and I didn't want to deal with it. I turned left at the next corner. He stopped walking for half a second. Then he gently touched my arm and said I usually go right there. My heart skipped. I laughed and said I felt like going this way tonight. He smiled, but it looked forced. He said the right path is faster. I asked how he knew which way I usually go. He hesitated just a fraction too long. Then he said he noticed last week. Last week. We had only been talking online for 2 weeks. We hadn't met in person before tonight. I asked what he meant. He said he saw me leaving the market once before, that he happened to be in the area. My stomach tightened. I don't remember seeing him there. I said I change routes sometimes. He nodded slowly and kept walking, but I could feel the shift in the air between us. After another block, I slowed down slightly, pretending to check something in my bag. He slowed too, matching my pace exactly. I felt like I was being mirrored. When we reached the next intersection, I turned right, heading toward a busier street instead of cutting through a quieter residential stretch. He sighed softly. Said that's not the most efficient way. Efficient. That word felt wrong in that moment. I told him I wasn't in a rush. He looked at me carefully. Asked if I didn't trust him. The question felt like a trap. I said it wasn't about trust. He smiled thinly. Said it's interesting how people change behavior when they feel observed. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. We walked another block in silence. I started noticing small details. He didn't look around much. He didn't seem distracted by cars or other pedestrians. His attention was on me, on my steps, on my choices. When we reached a small park that cuts through toward my street, I paused. This is the path I normally take. It's darker, less traffic, shorter. I hesitated. If I avoided it, it would be obvious I was avoiding him. If I took it, I would be alone with him in a darker area. I chose the busier sidewalk instead. He noticed immediately. Said that's unusual. My chest tightened again. I asked how he would know what's usual for me. He finally admitted he had walked behind me a few times after seeing me at the market. Said he likes understanding routines before approaching someone. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I asked how many times. He shrugged. Said enough to feel confident. Confident in what? He stopped walking and turned to face me fully. Said he prefers predictability. That when someone suddenly deviates from their normal path, it suggests something is wrong. I felt cold all over. I told him I just felt like switching it up. He stepped closer. Not aggressively, just close enough that I felt boxed in by his presence. Said I didn't need to test him. Test him. I realized then that this whole walk wasn't about safety. It was about confirming something. We were only 2 blocks from my building. I could see the dry cleaner sign down the street. I decided to make a sharp turn into a convenience store instead. Bright lights, cameras, people. He followed. Inside, I pretended to browse the snack aisle. He stood at the end of it watching. I grabbed a bottle of water I didn't need and paid $2 at the counter. When I stepped back outside, he was waiting by the door. He said I was overreacting. Said most women appreciate someone paying attention. Paying attention is different from tracking. I told him I didn't need him to walk me anymore. He smiled again, that same tight smile. Said he was almost there anyway. Almost where? I realized he didn't know my exact building number. He knew the street. Maybe the side, but not the door. I stopped walking and told him this was far enough. He looked past me down the block. His eyes lingered on the row of buildings. I could almost see him calculating. Then he nodded. Said he just wanted to make sure I got home safely. He turned and walked away without another word. I stood there for a full minute before moving. I didn't go straight home. I circled the block twice. When I finally reached my building, I looked up and down the street. Empty. I went inside and locked the door behind me. From my 3rd floor window, I watched the sidewalk for a long time. About 10 minutes later, I saw him. Standing across the street, looking up at the row of windows, trying to figure out which one was mine. I stepped back into the shadows of my apartment and didn't turn on the lights. He stayed there for a few minutes. Then he walked off in the direction we came from. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I changed my usual route to work. I haven't gone back to that market since. And I never let anyone walk me home again. I knew the night was over the second I saw my own face on her phone. Not in a selfie. Not from earlier that evening, but from outside the restaurant window, looking in at us like we were animals in a tank. I don't get nervous on first dates anymore. I used to back when I cared too much about what I said. Now I just show up and see what happens. If it's awkward, it's awkward. Whatever. This one felt different though, in a good way at first. We've been talking for 2 weeks and she was funny in a dry way. Not over the top. Not trying too hard. We picked this small Italian place downtown. It used to be a bookstore before it shut down. They kept the tall front windows, so the whole front wall is basically glass. At night, you can see straight in from the sidewalk. It's kind of cool because the street lights reflect off the window and everything inside looks warm. I got there early because I hate being late. I sat near the window without even thinking about it. That's important. I chose the table, not her. When she walked in, she looked just like her pictures. Dark hair, oversized sweater, kind of serious face until she smiled. She hugged me like we already knew each other. It felt normal. The first 20 minutes were actually good. We talked about work. I live in a small apartment near the train tracks, and she joked about how she could never sleep with that noise. She said she worked in graphic design, mostly from home. She mentioned liking photography, but said she wasn't very good at it. I remember that part clearly now. The restaurant wasn't crowded. A couple on the other side, an older guy at the bar. Soft music playing. Outside, people walked past every few minutes. You could see their shadows slide across the glass. I didn't notice anyone stopping. We ordered pasta. She got something with mushrooms. I got lasagna. We split a bottle of cheap red wine that cost $28. I only remember the price because I looked at the menu twice to make sure I wasn't overspending. Halfway through dinner, she got quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet, more like she was thinking about something. She kept glancing at the window behind me. At first, I thought she was distracted by people walking by. Then she picked up her phone. She didn't say anything. She just unlocked it and turned the screen toward me. It took my brain a second to process what I was looking at. It was us, sitting at that exact table. Her back slightly turned. We leaned forward with my hand near my glass. The angle was from outside, through the window. You could see the reflection of the streetlight across my face, and the timestamp in the corner said 3 minutes ago. I actually laughed at first because I thought maybe she was showing me some artsy shot someone else took. Maybe there was a street photographer out there and she thought it was funny. But the way she was looking at me wasn't playful. It was expectant. I asked her who took it. She said she did. I remember feeling confused in a really physical way, like my brain was lagging. She had been sitting across from me the entire time. She hadn't left the table. I would have noticed. The bathroom was behind me. If she'd gotten up, I'd have seen her walk that way. I told her that didn't make sense. She shrugged and zoomed in on the photo. There was someone faintly visible in the reflection on the glass, a silhouette standing on the sidewalk, holding a phone. My stomach dropped. I turned around fast, almost knocking my knee against the table. Outside, the sidewalk looked empty. A couple walking farther down. No one standing directly in front of our window. When I turned back, she was watching me carefully. She said she liked capturing moments as they happened, said it made things feel more real. I asked again how she took it. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she scrolled to another photo. This one was from a different angle, closer to the glass. You could see more detail in my face. The timestamp said 1 minute ago. I felt heat crawl up my neck. There was no way she'd taken that without leaving, unless someone else did. I scanned the restaurant. The older guy at the bar was staring into his drink. The couple was arguing quietly. No one looked suspicious. No one was holding the phone pointed at us. I asked her if someone was helping her. She smiled slightly and said she didn't like eating alone. That sentence didn't land right. I looked at the window again. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Across the street, near a park van, someone was standing still. It was hard to see because of the glare from the lights, just a shape. Tall, hood up, facing our direction. I felt my pulse pick up. When I looked back at her, she was already watching me instead of her phone. She said it was interesting how people don't notice being observed if they're comfortable. I asked her what she meant. She said she'd been coming to this restaurant for weeks, sitting outside sometimes, watching couples through the window, studying how they interact. The way she said studying made my skin crawl. She reached across the table and tapped my hand lightly, said she thought it'd be different. I pulled my hand back without even thinking. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. It was a photo. The same one she showed me, but taken from slightly farther back. You could see more of the sidewalk. And in that photo, clearly visible was her, standing outside the window, holding her phone up, while also sitting across from me at the table. I felt like the room tilted. I looked at her. She was still there, right in front of me. Same sweater, same expression. I looked back at the photo. The girl outside looked exactly like her. Same hair, same clothes. I checked the timestamp. It said just now. I slowly lifted my eyes toward the window. The figure across the street stepped forward into better light. It was her. Or someone who looked exactly like her. Same posture. Same oversized sweater. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I looked back at the girl sitting across from me. She hadn't moved. She was smiling faintly. I told myself it had to be a trick, a reflection, some weird angle with the glass. Then the girl outside raised her hand and waved. Not at the restaurant. At me. I couldn't breathe properly. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly across the floor. A few people looked over. The girl across from me stayed seated. She tilted her head slightly, like she was waiting to see what I'd do. My phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time taken from even closer to the glass. Close enough that you could see inside clearly. In that photo, the table across from me was empty. There was no one sitting there. I looked down at the table in real life. She was still there. I blinked hard. When I looked again, her chair was empty. Just empty. like she'd never been there. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it. The couple nearby were still arguing. The older guy still at the bar. No one seemed to notice anything strange. I slowly turned toward the window. The girl outside was gone. I grabbed my jacket and walked toward the door, not caring about the bill. When I stepped outside, the air felt colder than it should have. I looked up and down the sidewalk. Nothing. Then I noticed the van across the street. Its back doors were slightly open. Inside, I could see screens. Multiple screens. All showing live feeds. Of the restaurant. Different angles. Different tables. And one of them was focused on mine. On me. Standing alone. A hand reached out from inside the van and pulled the door shut. The engine started immediately. I ran toward it, but it sped off before I got close enough to see the driver clearly. I stood there on the sidewalk, trying to make sense of what just happened. My phone buzzed one last time. A final photo. Taken from directly behind me. Of me standing outside the restaurant. Looking at the empty street. I deleted every dating app that night. I still avoid restaurants with big front windows. I didn't notice the notebook at first. That's what gets me. It was right there on the table between us the whole time, but I was too focused on trying not to spill my drink or say something awkward. If I had paid attention earlier, maybe I would have left before she started writing things down about me like I was homework. We met at a small late-night diner off the highway, the kind of place truckers stop at around 1 in the morning. Bright white lights, cracked red booths, laminated menus that never really looked clean. I live about 15 minutes away in a one-bedroom above a pawn shop. The neon sign outside my window buzzes all night. I'm used to weird noise. It doesn't bother me. She picked the diner because she said she liked places that never close. Said you learn more about people when it's late and they're tired. When I walked in, she was already there in a booth near the back. Not against the wall. In the center of the room where she could see everything. A small black notebook sat next to her plate, a pen clipped to the top. I thought maybe she was studying before I got there. She smiled when she saw me and closed the notebook halfway, like she didn't want me reading it. The first hour was actually normal. We ordered fries and milkshakes. Mine was $9. Hers was just coffee. She barely touched it. She asked about my job at a shipping warehouse. Asked how long I had lived in my apartment. Asked if I ever get lonely. I answered casually. I'm used to small talk. Then she started asking more specific things. She asked if I ever checked the back seat of my car before getting in. I laughed and said only after watching horror movies. She didn't laugh. She nodded and wrote something down. That's when I realized she wasn't doodling. She was documenting. I asked what she was writing. She said she likes to remember details. It sounded harmless, but something about the way she said it felt deliberate. She asked what kind of lock I have on my apartment door. I told her it's just a basic deadbolt. She wrote again. I asked why that mattered. She shrugged and said safety is interesting. I felt a small knot in my stomach, but kept going. It was just conversation, I told myself. Then she leaned forward slightly and asked what my biggest fear was. The diner was quiet at that moment. Only one other table occupied by 2 guys in work boots talking softly. The cook in the back flipping something on the grill. It felt like a deep question for a first date, but not completely out of place. Some people like heavy conversations. I hesitated for a second. Then I answered honestly. I said my biggest fear was in control of my own mind, not knowing what's real and what isn't. The idea of being manipulated without realizing it scares me more than anything physical. She didn't react the way most people do. No reassurance, no teasing. She slowly opened the notebook fully. She wrote down every word. Carefully. Control of mind. Manipulation. Not knowing what's real. Then she underlined it. And smiled. Not a wide smile. Just small and satisfied. I felt a chill move through my chest. I asked why she needed that. She said everyone has a pressure point. Pressure point. I laughed awkwardly and said that sounds intense. She shrugged and said it's just human nature. The rest of the date felt different after that. She started bringing up small inconsistencies in things I said earlier. I mentioned once that I usually get home from work around 6. Later, she said I told her 7. I was pretty sure I said 6 both times. She tilted her head slightly and said, maybe I misremembered. I felt defensive immediately. I told her I was sure. She smiled gently and said memory is fragile. Then she wrote something else down. My chest tightened. I started second-guessing myself. Had I said 7 at some point? I replayed the conversation in my head. I was almost certain I hadn't. She asked if I ever questioned my own perception. I told her everyone does sometimes. She nodded like that was confirmation. At one point, she excused herself to the restroom. I sat there staring at the notebook. It was closed, but not fully. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it just a little. There were pages filled with names. Not just mine. Different handwriting styles under each name. Short notes next to them. Afraid of being alone. Hates confrontation. Needs validation. My stomach dropped. Next to my name was what I had just told her. Control of mind. Manipulation. Not knowing what's real. Underneath it, in smaller letters. Test gradually. My heart started pounding so hard I thought the guys at the other table could hear it. I closed the notebook quickly just as she returned. She sat down and looked at me closely. Asked if I had touched her things. I said no. She studied my face like she was measuring my reaction. Then she smiled again. Said I was doing well. Doing well at what? She said most people start getting uncomfortable around this point. I didn't know what to say. She reached into her bag and pulled out something small. A voice recorder. She set it on a table between us. Said it helps capture authenticity. I felt like the air got thinner. I asked if she had been recording. She nodded calmly. Said she likes to read conversations later and compare them to memory. My heart was racing now. I told her that wasn't okay. She said it's public space. Then she leaned closer. Said don't worry, I wouldn't distort anything. That word again. Distort. Like my fear had already been cataloged and filed for later use. I stood up abruptly. The booth squeaked loudly against the floor. She didn't try to stop me. She just looked up and said, thank you for being honest. As I walked toward the door, she called out softly that I should be careful what I share next time. Outside, the night air felt suffocating. I drove home with my heart still pounding. When I got to my apartment, something felt off. Not dramatic, just subtle. I stepped inside and locked the door. On my kitchen counter, there was a piece of paper. Folded once. My name written on the front. My stomach dropped so hard it hurt. I opened it slowly. Inside was a list. My routines. Work hours. Gym days. Favorite grocery store. And at the bottom. Biggest fear. Underlined. With a small smiley face next to it. I stood there for a long time staring at that page. I don't know how she got into my apartment. I don't know how long she had been watching. I only know that she didn't just keep a notebook. She kept a list. I should have paid attention to her face. Not what she said, not the tone, her face. Because the second I told her someone knew exactly where I was, her expression dropped for just a second. Not dramatic, just a small frown, like I had ruined something she was looking forward to. And that was the moment I realized I might have saved myself. We met at a hiking trail about 30 minutes outside the city. That was her idea. She said she hated crowded places for first dates. Said she preferred something quiet where people could actually talk. I almost suggested coffee instead, but I figured daytime hiking was safe enough. It was early afternoon, clear sky, plenty of cars in the parking lot. I live alone in a small rental house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Thin walls. Old carpet. But I've always been careful about sharing my location on dates. I've seen too many stories online. So before I left, I sent my best friend a screenshot of her profile and the exact trailhead location. I even shared my live location through my phone. When I got there, she was already standing near the map board at the entrance. She wore black leggings and a gray hoodie. No backpack. That struck me as odd for someone who picked a hiking date. She smiled when she saw me. Friendly. Calm. Not overly excited. We started walking down the main trail, gravel crunching under our shoes, trees lining both sides, other hikers passing occasionally. At first, it felt normal. She asked about my job. I told her I worked in a car dealership office. She asked if I liked to live in a house alone. I said I did. I value privacy. She nodded slowly, like that answer meant something. About 10 minutes into the hike, she asked if I told anyone I was coming here. The question felt casual at first. I said, yeah, my friend knows. She glanced at my phone in my hand. Then she asked if anyone knew exactly where I was. Not just generally, exactly. There was something in the way she emphasized it. I told her yes. I told her I shared my location. That's when her expression changed. Just slightly. Her lips pressed together for half a second. Her eyes flicked away from mine toward the trees. Then she smiled again. Said that was smart. But the smile didn't reach her eyes. We kept walking. She suggested we take a side trail. Said it was less crowded and more scenic. I hesitated. The main trail was busy enough that I felt comfortable. The side path looked narrower. Fewer footprints. No one else heading that way. I said I preferred to stick to the main one. She tilted her head slightly. Asked if I didn't trust her. I laughed and said I just like staying where there are more people. She nodded again. But there was something tense in the air now. About 20 minutes later, the trail thinned out. The crowd had spread out more. We hadn't seen anyone in a few minutes. She asked if my friend could see my exact dot on the map. I said yes. She asked if it updated in real time. I said pretty much. She slowed her pace slightly. I could feel the shift. Then she asked what would happen if my phone died. My stomach tightened. I told her I brought a portable charger. She smiled again. Said I was prepared. There was something about the way she said prepared that felt like she was adjusting the plan in her head. We reached a small clearing with a wooden bench and a view of the valley. It was quiet. No one else around. She sat down on the bench and patted the spot next to her. I stayed standing for a second before sitting. She stared out at the trees for a while. Then she asked how long my friend would keep checking my location. I told her probably until I got home. She asked if my friend knew her name. I said yes. I watched her face carefully this time. Another small flicker. She asked if I sent a screenshot. I said yes. That's when she finally exhaled in a way that didn't sound pleased. She leaned back against the bench and said most guys don't do that. My heart started pounding. I asked what she meant. She shrugged and said most guys just show up. No one knows where they are. No one expects them back at a certain time. The wind moved through the trees, making this low rustling sound that suddenly felt louder than it should have. I asked why that mattered. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she looked at my phone again. Asked what percentage my battery was at. I said 78. She nodded. Then she said something that made my chest go tight. She said it's annoying when plans get complicated. Plans. I stood up slowly. Said I should probably head back soon. She didn't move. Just looked up at me. Then she smiled in a way that felt completely different from earlier. Less warm. More calculating. She said I was cautious. Said she appreciated that. But her tone didn't sound appreciative. It sounded disappointed. I started walking back toward the main trail without waiting for her. She followed. About halfway back, I heard footsteps behind us. Not hers. Heavier. I turned around. A guy stepped out from behind a cluster of trees. Tall, buddy up. My heart nearly stopped. She didn't look surprised. She didn't even look confused. She just looked annoyed. The guy glanced at her. Then at me. I felt my phone vibrate in my hand. A message from my friend asking if everything was okay because my location had stopped moving for a while. I realized we must have been in a spot with weak signal. I quickly typed back that I was fine. The guy took a step closer. She suddenly spoke in a calm tone and said this isn't going to work. The guy hesitated. She shook her head slightly. He looked irritated. Then he turned and walked back into the trees. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I stared at her. She didn't even try to explain. She just said it would have been easier if no one knew exactly where you were. That sentence felt like ice down my spine. I didn't respond. I just walked. Fast. She didn't chase me. She didn't apologize. She didn't say goodbye. When I reached the parking lot, I looked back once. She was standing near the trail entrance, watching me leave. Completely calm. I got in my car and locked the doors immediately. As I pulled out, my phone buzzed again. A message from her. It said, "Next time, don't tell anyone." I blocked her number before I even reached the highway. I still hike sometimes, but I never go alone anymore. I knew something was wrong the moment he said he liked documenting milestones. Not memories, not moments, milestones. That word felt too formal for a first date that was supposed to be casual pizza and a walk by the river. I should have paid attention to that weird feeling in my stomach right then, but I didn't. I brushed it off like I always do, told myself I was overthinking it. We met at a small pizza place near the waterfront. Nothing fancy. Plastic chairs, paper napkins, a smell of grease in the air. I live about 10 minutes away in a second-floor apartment over a nail salon. You can hear dryers humming all day. I like being near the river, though. It feels open. He was already there when I walked in, sitting at a corner table with his back against the wall. I've started noticing that detail lately, the wall seat. The clear view of the door. He waved, smiles, stood up politely. He looked exactly like his photos. Clean cut, simple hoodie, watch on his wrist. The first half of the date was fine. We talked about work. I told him I manage inventory at a small grocery store. He said he worked in data analysis. He joked about how he likes patterns more than people. I laughed because it sounded harmless. We split a large pizza, $22 total. He insisted on paying, said first dates are investments. That word again. After we ate, he suggested walking along the river path. It was still light out. Families around. Joggers passing by. I felt safe enough. We walked for about 20 minutes, talking about random stuff. Movies. Travel. Childhood stories. He asked more questions than he answered, but that's not unusual. Eventually, we ended up near a quieter stretch of the path. Fewer people. Just the sound of water and wind. He stopped walking suddenly and said he wanted to show me something. I expected maybe a funny meme or a picture of his dog. Instead, he pulled out his phone and opened a folder. Not a random gallery scroll. A folder. He held the screen out toward me. It was filled with photos of him sitting across from different women at restaurants, parks, cafes. Clearly first dates. The angle was always slightly above table level, like the phone had been propped up discreetly. My chest tightened immediately. I asked what that was. He said documentation. He scrolled slowly. Each photo had a date stamped on it. He had been doing this for years. Different women, different settings. Always the same framing. Him on one side, her on the other, smiling awkwardly at the camera. I felt exposed just looking at them. Then he looked at me and asked if I noticed the pattern. The way he said it made my stomach drop. I looked closer. At first, nothing obvious stood out. Then I noticed something small. Every woman in the photos had dark hair like mine. Similar build. Similar smile. He zoomed in on one photo. Said, "Look at the posture." He zoomed in on another. Said, "Notice the way she leans in." He scrolled again. Every picture was taken around the same time of day. Similar lighting. Similar angle. He said he likes consistency. I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. I asked why he was showing me this. He said transparency builds trust. Then he added that most of them didn't notice the pattern. My heart started pounding. I asked what happened to them. He shrugged. Said some didn't make it past the first date. Some lasted longer. He swiped again. Then he opened a second folder. This one wasn't just first date photos. It was screenshots of messages, fragments of conversations, notes under each woman's name. Fear of abandonment, trust issues, easily flattered, prefers public places. I felt a wave of nausea. He looked at me carefully, said I was interesting because I didn't interrupt him much. I stepped back slightly. He noticed, smiled faintly, said, "Don't worry, I don't post these anywhere." Like that was the main concern. I asked why he kept them. He said he studies patterns to improve outcomes. Improve what outcomes? He tapped the screen again, zoomed into one photo. The woman looked uncomfortable, her smile strained. He said she panicked when he mentioned the folder. He scrolled to another, said she pretended to laugh. He looked at me, said I was handling it better. My chest felt tight. I asked if they knew he was taking photos. He said some did. Some didn't. The river behind us suddenly felt too quiet. He asked if I wanted to take one now. My heart skipped. I said no. He tilted his head slightly, said it would complete the sequence. Sequence. I felt trapped in a way I couldn't explain. We were in a public space. People were still walking past occasionally, but it felt isolated. I told him I needed to go. He didn't block me. He just looked disappointed. Said most women get upset at this point. I asked why he does this. He said he's looking for the one who notices the pattern early, the one who understands. I didn't respond. I just started walking back toward the main path. He followed a few steps behind. Not too close. Just enough to remind me he was there. After a minute, he said I didn't answer his question. I didn't turn around. I kept walking. When we reached the busier area again, he stopped. Said he wouldn't chase. Said the right one stays. I didn't look back. I got to my car with my heart still racing. As I drove home, my phone buzzed. A message from him. It was a photo. Of me. From earlier that evening. Sitting at the pizza place. The same angle as the others. Underneath it, he wrote, "Now look at the pattern." I blocked him immediately, but the image stayed in my head. Later that night, I checked my social media. There was a new follower. A blank profile with no picture. The bio said documenting progress. I don't know how many folders he has. I don't know how many patterns he's building. I just know I'm probably still in one of them. I knew I wasn't going to enjoy the rest of the night the second she said she hated ghosting. It wasn't the statement itself. Everyone says they hate ghosting. It was the way she leaned back in her chair after staying it, like she had been waiting to bring it up. Like it was the main point of the evening. We met at a small bowling alley on the edge of town. Not the modern kind with flashing lights and a bar in the middle. This place smelled like old carpet and shoe spray. The scoreboard screens flickered sometimes. I lived about 20 minutes away at a split-level house I'd rent with a friend. It's quiet out there. Too quiet sometimes. She picked the bowling alley because she said it felt nostalgic. Said people are more honest when they're doing something simple. At first, it was actually fun. We laughed at how bad we both were. I lost by 30 points. She high-fived me after every frame like we were teammates instead of strangers. We ordered nachos and sodas, $26 total. I paid. She didn't argue. Halfway through the second game, she asked how many first dates I had been on in the past year. I said a few. She asked how many led to second dates. I shrugged and said not many. She nodded slowly and asked if I usually send a message explaining why or if I just let it fade. That's when she said she hated ghosting. I laughed awkwardly and said no one likes it. She didn't laugh. She placed her bowling ball down carefully, wiped her hands on a napkin, and looked straight at me. She said the last guy who tried that learned something important. The way she said learned made my stomach tighten. I asked what happened. She smiled slightly and said he stopped replying after the first date. Said he read her messages but didn't answer. She described how she gave him a week, then 2. She said she doesn't believe in disappearing without closure. I felt a subtle shift in the air. She said she looked him up online, found out where he worked, what gym he went to, what time he usually left in the morning. She described it calmly, like she was talking about planning a grocery list. My heart started beating faster. I tried to keep it light, said that's intense. She nodded, said it's necessary. She told me she waited outside his gym one morning, watched him come out confused. She said she didn't approach him then. She just wanted him to know someone was watching. My chest felt tight. I asked if he apologized. She said not at first, so she escalated. That word hit hard. She said she started sending him photos. Not threatening ones. Just photos of places he had been earlier that day. His car parked outside work. His apartment building at night. She described how his replies got frantic after that. How he kept asking how she found him. She said he finally agreed to meet her again. Not because he liked her, but because he was scared. She told me they met at a coffee shop. Public place. He apologized. She said she appreciated that. Then she told him she forgave him. My stomach was in knots. I asked what happened after. She said she made sure he understood the consequences of disrespect. I didn't like that phrasing. She said she walked him to his car afterward. Then she followed him home, just to see if he would check his mirrors. She laughed lightly at that part. I didn't. The bowling alley felt smaller suddenly, like the lanes were too narrow. She picked up her ball again and rolled it straight down the center. Strike. She didn't celebrate. She just turned back to me and said she doesn't give second chances lightly. I felt like I was being evaluated. I told her I don't ghost people. She nodded, said good. But then she added that people change their minds sometimes. The rest of the game felt forced. I kept glancing at the exit. She noticed. Asked if I was in a rush. I said I had work early. She said that's fine. But her tone suggested something else. After we returned the shoes and stepped outside, the parking lot was mostly empty. Streetlights casting long shadows. She asked if anyone knew I was out with her. The question hit me wrong immediately. I said my roommate did. She tilted her head slightly. Asked if he knew exactly where. I said yes. She paused. Then smiled. Said that's smart. The same way someone compliments you for locking your door. I walked her to her car because it felt expected. Before getting in, she said she appreciated honesty. Then she added that disappearing without explanation says a lot about character. I told her I understood. She got into her car and drove off. I sat in my own car for a minute before starting the engine. Something felt off. I checked my phone. A message from her already. It said I had fun tonight. Underneath it, another message. It said, I hope you're not the type to vanish. I didn't respond right away. I drove home trying to convince myself I was overthinking it. When I pulled into my driveway, my roommate's car was there. I felt slightly relieved. Inside, I told him about the date in a half-joking way. He said she sounded intense. I agreed. The next morning, I woke up to 5 missed calls from an unknown number. And a text. It said good morning. Another one followed. It said I noticed you got home at 10:42 p.m. My heart stopped. I checked my phone. My location sharing was off. I never shared it with her. I replied asking how she knew. She responded with a photo of my driveway, taken at night. My car visible under the streetlight. Timestamped 10:45 p.m. My hands started shaking. Another message came through. It said, I don't like being ignored. I hadn't even had time to respond. I blocked her number immediately. 2 minutes later, another message from a different number. It said blocking me doesn't count as closure. I felt sick. I didn't reply. That afternoon, my roommate told me someone had walked past the house slowly twice while he was home. I didn't tell him everything. That night, around midnight, I heard tires on gravel outside. I looked through the window. A car parked down the street with its headlights off. I couldn't see who was inside. My phone buzzed. It said I hate ghosting. I didn't sleep. The next day, I changed my number. I haven't been on a date since. Because some people don't disappear quietly. I knew I wasn't safe when he stopped smiling. Up until that point, everything had been controlled, polite, measured. He held doors open. He asked about my job. He nodded at the right times. But the second I shifted in my seat and said I might head out soon, something behind his eyes changed. Not angry, not loud, just calm in a way that didn't feel human. He leaned closer and calmly said, if you leave before I'm ready, this gets messy. Not whispered aggressively, not shouted, just said like he was explaining a rule I should have known. We met at a rooftop lounge on top of a hotel downtown. Not super fancy, but expensive enough that drinks were $17 each and everyone pretended they weren't checking the prices. I live about 15 minutes away in a studio above a bakery. My windows fog up every morning from the ovens downstairs. I like that, it smells sweet when I wake up. He picked the place, said he liked somewhere with a view. When I got there, he was already at a table near the edge of the rooftop, city lights glowing behind him. He stood up when he saw me and smiled in a way that felt rehearsed. Not fake exactly, just practiced. The first half hour was normal. We talked about work. I told him I managed social media for a small clothing brand. He said he worked in private security consulting. That sounded vague but impressive enough that I didn't question it. He ordered a bottle of wine without asking if I even liked wine. I said I usually just get soda. He waved it off and said, I'd like this one. That should have been my first warning. The conversation kept drifting into strange territory. He asked if I usually tell friends where I'm going on dates. I said sometimes. He asked if I share my location with anyone. I said not always. He nodded slowly like he was logging that. He asked if I had roommates. I told him I live alone. Another slow nod. The city looked beautiful from out there. Cars moving like lines of light. Music playing softly from hidden speakers. Other couples at tables laughing quietly. I started to relax. Then he asked how I usually end dates. I laughed and said it depends. He pressed. Said, do I hug? Do I shake hands? Do I disappear? Disappear felt loaded. I said I'm honest if I'm not interested. He studied my face carefully. About an hour in, I checked my phone. It was getting late. I had work early. I told him I should probably head out soon. That's when he leaned closer. His hand rested on the table near mine, but not touching. And he said if you leave before I'm ready, this gets messy. I felt my stomach drop. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe he meant awkward messy. But he didn't smile. He just held eye contact. I asked what he meant. He said, I don't like unfinished interactions. His tone didn't change. Still calm, still even. I told him I wasn't trying to be rude. He said, I know. Then he added that sometimes people need encouragement to stay. The word encouragement made my chest tighten. I looked around. Other tables were occupied, but everyone was wrapped up in their own conversations. I shifted in my chair and said I really did have to go. He leaned back slightly, but his eyes never left mine. He said, I think you misunderstood. Then he gestured subtly toward my purse sitting on the floor beside my chair. I glanced down. It wasn't where I left it. It was slightly farther under the table. I reached down to grab it. He moved his foot just enough to block it casually. Not forcefully, just enough to make it clear. My heart started pounding. He said I prefer when things end on my timeline. I told him I wasn't comfortable. He tilted his head slightly. Said discomfort is temporary. That sentence made my hands feel cold. I stood up abruptly. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. A couple at a nearby table glanced over. He remained seated. Calm. He said, if you walk away without finishing this, I'll have to make a scene. My throat went dry. I asked what kind of scene. He said something that made my chest feel hollow. He said I could stand up right now and tell everyone you tried to steal from me. Or that you threatened me. Or that you attacked me. He said people believe confidence. He said I work in security. I'd know how to talk. My brain was racing. I realized he had positioned himself between me and the easiest path to the exit. He wasn't touching me. He wasn't yelling. He was just controlling the situation quietly. I sat back down slowly. Not because I wanted to. Because I needed time. He smiled faintly when I did. Said that's better. For the next 15 minutes, he talked like nothing happened. Asked about my childhood. About my hobbies. About what scares me most. I answered vaguely, trying to look calm. My phone buzzed in my purse. He glanced down. Said you can check that later. My pulse was so loud in my ears I could barely hear his voice. I scanned the rooftop again. There was a waitress near the bar. A couple near the stairs laughing loudly. If I could create enough noise, maybe it would draw attention. He noticed me looking around. He said raising your voice would be a mistake. He said people don't like conflict in places like this. I realized he wasn't bluffing randomly. He was counting on social discomfort. On the fact that I wouldn't want to cause a scene. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Then I did something I don't usually do. I knocked my glass of wine over. Hard. It shattered on the floor. Red liquid splashing across the table and onto his pants. The sound was sharp enough to make half the rooftop look over. The waitress rushed toward us. I stood up immediately and said I was so sorry loudly. Too loudly. People were watching now. He stood up too, but his calm mask cracked for a second. Just a flicker. The waitress asked if everything was okay. I said I felt dizzy and needed to leave. I didn't look at him. I grabbed my purse quickly while he was distracted by the broken glass. He didn't stop me. He couldn't without making a bigger scene than he wanted. I walked fast toward the stairs. Not running, just fast. My heart felt like it was going to burst. I didn't look back until I was halfway down. He was standing at the railing, watching me. Not angry. Just studying. I got to my car and locked the doors immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit there for a minute before driving. On my way home, my phone buzzed again. A message from him. It said that was messy. Underneath it, another message. It said, I don't like being interrupted. I blocked him. When I got home, I double-locked my door. I haven't been back to that rooftop since. Sometimes I still think about how calm he was when he said it would get messy. And how easily it could have been worse. I should have been flattered when she said we were meant to meet. Instead, I felt like I had stepped into something that was already written down somewhere, and I was just catching up to it. We met at a quiet observatory on the edge of town. Not the big tourist one, just a small hill with a few public telescopes and a view of the skyline. She picked it because she said she liked places where the sky felt close. I live about 20 minutes away in a small duplex behind a grocery store. My side has a crooked fence and a porch light that flickers sometimes. It's nothing special, but it's mine. When I got to the observatory parking lot, the sun was just starting to set. The sky was orange and purple. She was already there, leaning against the hood of her car, looking up like she had been waiting longer than she admitted. She smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't nervous or awkward like most first dates. It was confident, certain. We walked up the hill together. There were a few other people around, mostly couples with cameras. The air was cool but not cold. The first part of the date felt normal enough. We talked about work. I told her I worked in its support. She said she worked at a small antique shop downtown. She asked how long I had lived in my duplex. I said about a year. Then she started talking about fate. Not in a joking way. She said she believed everything important is already set in motion before we realize it. That people don't randomly cross paths. I smiled and said sometimes it's just an algorithm. She shook her head gently. Said the algorithm is part of it. That answer sat weird with me. We stopped near one of the telescopes and looked out over the city lights as they flickered on one by one. She asked if I ever think about how many tiny decisions had to line up for us to be standing there at that exact moment. I shrugged and said probably a lot. She nodded slowly. Then she said this date couldn't fail. Not that she hoped it wouldn't. Not that she wanted it to go well. She said it couldn't fail. My stomach tightened slightly. I asked what she meant. She turned to face me fully and said because it was arranged long before we matched. Arranged. That word stuck. I laughed lightly and said arranged by who. She didn't laugh. She said by her. My heart skipped. She explained it calmly, like it was obvious. She said she noticed me months ago, at the grocery store near my house. She said she saw me buying the same brand of cereal 3 weeks in a row. I felt my chest go tight. I asked which grocery store. She named the one directly behind my duplex, the one I walked to. She said she recognized a pattern, that I always went around the same time on Thursdays, that I park in the same spot. My skin felt cold. I told her that's coincidence. She shook her head. Said coincidence is just fate, you haven't mapped yet. She started listing other details. She said I jog along the river trail every Saturday morning, that I sometimes stop at the coffee stand near the bridge, that I check my phone more when I'm waiting in line. I stared at her. I never told her any of that. She smiled softly. Said she needed to be sure. Sure of what? She said compatibility isn't about conversation. It's about patterns aligning. My heart was pounding harder now. I asked how long she had been watching me. She looked up at the sky for a second, like calculating, then said long enough to know this would work. I stepped back slightly. She noticed. Said most people react like that at first. React like what? She said, unsettled. The word hit exactly right. She told me she made sure we would match. She adjusted her profile photos based on what I lingered on. She said she tested timing. Logged into the app only when I was active. She described it like a project. Like she had built a bridge and I just walked across it without realizing. I felt exposed in a way I couldn't explain. The observatory suddenly felt too open, too quiet. She said she doesn't believe in random meetings. She believes in design. She said she had already imagined this exact evening. The hill. The sky. The way I would stand slightly to the left of the telescope. My breathing felt shallow. I asked what would happen if I decided this wasn't for me. She smiled. Not threatening. Just certain. She said that wouldn't make sense. Because this can't fail. I asked why she was so sure. She stepped closer. Close enough that I could see how steady her eyes were. She said because I've already accounted for every outcome. My pulse thudded in my ears. She told me she knew where I live. Which window is mine? Which nights I stay up later. She said she saw the porch light flicker last week. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest. I asked if she had been near my house. She said of course. How else would she confirm the alignment? Alignment. She kept using words that made it sound structured. Planned. Controlled. I told her this was too much. She tilted her head slightly. Said it only feels like too much when you don't understand the design. I took a step back. Then another. She didn't chase. She just watched. Said running would only delay it. Delay what? She said what's meant to happen. I turned and started walking down the hill toward the parking lot. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might trip. I heard her footsteps behind me at first. Then they stopped. I didn't look back. When I reached my car, I locked the doors immediately. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. Before pulling out, I glanced up at the hill. She was still standing near the telescope, watching me. Not waving. Just watching. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. A message from her. It said, "You can't undo what's already in motion." I blocked her number. When I got home, I parked farther down the street than usual. As I walked toward my duplex, I looked up at my window. The porch light flickered once, then stayed on. The next morning, I found something taped to my door. A printed screenshot of my dating profile. Underneath it, written in pen, "Some things are inevitable." I moved out 2 weeks later. I still don't know how long she had been mapping my life. I just know she didn't believe in chance. I knew something was wrong when he didn't ask for my address. Most guys do. Even if they pretend they don't want to walk you all the way home, they still ask which building is yours. He didn't. He just followed a half step behind me like he already knew exactly where I was going. We met at a late-night ramen place downtown. Not the trendy kind with long lines, just a narrow shop with 6 tables and foggy windows. I live about 12 minutes away in a small brick apartment building near the old train tracks. It's quiet after dark except for the occasional freight train rolling through. Dinner itself felt normal. We talked about music, work, random childhood stuff. He told me he worked in logistics planning. I told him I worked front desk at a gym. He listened more than he talked. I remember thinking that was kind of refreshing. The only strange thing was how often he looked around the restaurant. Not nervously, just scanning like he was taking mental notes. When we finished eating, the bill was $31. He paid without hesitation. We stepped outside into the cool night air. Streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. A few cars passing by. He asked if I walked home. I said yeah, it's close. He said he would walk me. I told him he didn't have to. He said he wanted to. The walk started off normal. We talked about how quiet the city gets after midnight, about how weird it is that so many windows are dark at the same time. About 3 blocks in, I realized he wasn't asking for directions. He didn't say, "Is it this way?" He didn't hesitate at intersections. He turned when I turned. When I slowed down slightly, he slowed too. When I crossed the street, he crossed without looking at me for confirmation. I asked if he knew this area. He said he'd been around. That answer didn't feel specific enough. As we got closer to my building, I started to feel a tightness in my chest. Not full panic. Just that sense that something is slightly off. I stopped walking half a block from my place. Told him this was far enough. He smiled softly. Said he didn't mind going the rest of the way. I told him I was good. He tilted his head slightly and said it's safer. Safer for who? I resumed walking because standing there arguing felt more awkward. When my building came into view, I felt a wave of relief. The porch light was on. A couple of windows upstairs still lit. I reached the front steps and pulled my keys out of my purse. That's when he stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel his presence right behind me. As I reached my door, he smiled softly and said, "Relax." This is usually when they realize it's too late. My hand froze on the key. I turned slowly. He was smiling the same way he had all night. Calm. Almost gentle. I asked what he meant. He shrugged lightly. Said most people don't notice the setup until the door is already unlocked. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it. I tried to laugh like he was joking. He didn't laugh. He said, "I prefer timing." That word again. Timing. I stepped back slightly, putting space between us. He didn't move forward. He just watched me. I told him I didn't understand. He glanced at the door handle, then back at me. Said, "Once you open that door, you confirm routine." Routine. I felt cold all over. I asked how he knew this was my building. He looked confused for a second, like I was asking something obvious. He said, "I've walked you home before." My chest tightened. I told him this was our first date. He nodded slowly. Said, "First official one." My stomach dropped. He explained calmly that he noticed me leaving this building months ago. Said he saw me a few times at the ramen place before we ever matched. He said he likes observing before approaching. The word observing made my skin crawl. I told him this wasn't funny. He said he wasn't joking. Then he said something that made my breath hitch. He said the pattern is always the same. They invite me up or they don't. But they always unlock the door first. I looked down at my hand, still holding the key inches from the lock. I realized he had maneuvered me into this exact position. Public sidewalk. No one around at this hour. My door between us. If I opened it, he could follow before I reacted. If I didn't, I was stuck outside with him. I stepped away from the door entirely. He noticed immediately. His smile faded slightly. He said, "That's new." My voice felt shaky as I asked new compared to what. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he said most of them panic at this point. My heart felt like it was going to burst. I glanced up and down the street. Empty. I told him I wasn't comfortable. He tilted his head again. Said comfort is subjective. Then he took one slow step closer. I backed up toward the edge of the steps. He didn't rush. Didn't grab me. Just controlled the space. He said you already brought me here. That part stuck with me. As if walking beside me meant permission. I realized arguing wasn't going to work. I did the only thing I could think of. I turned around and knocked loudly on my own door. Hard. Repeatedly. My upstairs neighbor sometimes stays up late. I knocked like I was locked out. He looked genuinely surprised. That small break in his calm gave me just enough courage. I kept knocking and calling out loudly for my neighbor. Lights flicked on in the apartment next to mine. A window opened slightly. My neighbor's voice asked if everything was okay. I said yes, just forgot something and needed help. He stepped back slowly. His expression shifted. Still calm, but disappointed. He said it's messy. Then he stepped off the porch. He didn't run. He didn't argue. He just walked down a sidewalk like he had more time than I did. My neighbor opened his door a few seconds later. I went inside quickly and locked both the main door and my apartment door upstairs. From my window, I watched him reach the end of the block. He stopped once, looked back toward my building, then kept walking. The next morning, I checked the dating app. His profile was gone. Deleted. 2 days later, I found something in my mailbox. No stamp. Just my name written neatly on the front. Inside was a photo, taken from across the street, of me unlocking my door. From weeks ago. Underneath it, written in small letters, you changed the ending. I don't walk home alone anymore.